Well, good afternoon. I'd like to call the Port Commission of October 17th to order. Our first item, we did not have an executive session today, so our first item is a roll call. Let the record show that all three Port Commissioners are present. Our advisory committees are meeting November 9th is the Technical Airport Advisory Committee, and that's at 9:30 at the ARF building on November 9th, Thursday. Same day the BIAC meets, same place at 5 o'clock at the ARF building. And the next Marine Advisory Committee meeting is November 14th right here in this room at 6 p.m. So with that, our next item of order is public comment period. And we have two people signed up. One is Mr. Phil Reese.
Phil Reese says he's sorry. He's run a little bit late, but he would like to speak.
Okay.
If there's a moment for him.
We can make time. The next public comment is Debbie Meda.
I want to take this time, because I was not available, I was out of town last time you had a meeting. And I just want to take this time to thank you all for agreeing to fund the increase in safety at the railroad crossings. And this is really important to everybody's safety. People live near there, they work near there, they play there, and we need to make it as safe as physically possible. In light of this, I wanted to share a news blurb from today, and it was that a freight train derailed along the Seattle waterfront. Below the Olympic Sculpture Park near downtown Seattle's waterfront, 7 Burlington Northern Santa Fe train cars have wheels off the track along Myrtle Edwards Park. The train, which is on a side track, is not blocking traffic. And the cars, fortunately, were carrying grain. But think what a different outcome this could be if the cars were carrying, say, Bakken crude oil, which is highly volatile and could easily cause a fire disaster like we have seen before when the Bakken oil cars have derailed. It's really important to include all the safety measures we can to make this as safe a community as we can for living, working, playing, all the things that make Bellingham a desirable place. Thank you, commissioners, for doing your part.
Thank you for your comments. So is there anyone that wanted to sign up that didn't, or wanted to speak that didn't sign up? Okay, we'll move on to our next item. The next item is our consent agenda, if you will, please, Diane.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Okay, gentlemen, do you have any questions on the consent agenda?
I have none.
No questions.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Our next item is an action item, if you will, please, Diane.
A motion to approve a consent to assignment of agreements between the Port of Bellingham and Northwest Explorations LLC to transfer all membership interests from Brian and Carol Pemberton to Ross and Evelyn Tennant Limited and Ross and Evelyn Tennant, a married couple, for multiple premises located in the vicinity of Squalicum Harbor, Bellingham.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, Diane. For the record, my name is Brady Scott, real estate representative with the Port of Bellingham. Quick background, Northwest Explorations, you know, as a marine trade tenant whose business is boat sales, boat charters, marine parts sales and service. Brian and Carol Pemberton have been owners of Northwest Explorations, and in 2004, they acquired the lease for their premises at Squalcombe Esplanade and have operated out of the Gate 3 area. Between 2012 and 2013, they expanded their presence by adding 2 additional lease premises at the Harbor Mall and at Marina Square. Today, Northwest Explorations has 3 leases, 26 mortgage agreements, a web locker agreement, a conduit license agreement, and a use permit authorizing a Wi-Fi system to serve their fleet while in port. Brian and Carol Pemberton approached us earlier this year with the news that they wish to sell their membership interests to Ross and Evelyn Tennant Ltd., a Canadian corporation, and Ross and Evelyn Tennant, a married couple. Northwest Explorations intends to continue their operations with the same staff under their new ownership. Unfortunately, Brian Pemberton wished he could be here tonight but couldn't make it. But here is, in the audience, is Alice Horn, the general manager of Northwest Explorations. And I would like to introduce Ross and Evelyn Tennant, the pending new owners who have requested to say a few words to the commission.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners and staff. My name is Ross Tennant, and this is my wife, Evelyn Tennant. We're really pleased that you'll consider our application, and we are thrilled to be involved in the Port of Bellingham and really looking forward to maintaining the direction and business practices that Brian and the staff at Northwest Explorations have championed. They've got about 30 good career earning or living wage earning jobs, and we look forward to continuing that and trying to build upon it. So thank you for considering our request.
You bet. Any questions?
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Before you step away, I understand you had something to do with the Dockside Green development up in Victoria. And we won't talk about it now, but we may call on your expertise there in the coming weeks as we contemplate some things similar to what happened up there.
Sure, I'd be happy to compare notes with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-1, and welcome to the Port of Bellingham.
3-0.
3-0, what did I say? 3-1? I'm sorry. 3-0.
Said no. Come on now.
Jiminy Cricket, I guess, on the show.
So our next action item, item number 2, if you will, please, Diane.
Authorize the executive director to execute the interlocal agreement between the Port of Bellingham and the City of Bellingham for Waypoint Park Beach construction, pending no substantive changes.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowron, Director of Environmental Programs. This interlocal agreement with the City of Bellingham is related to the Waypoint Park Beach construction. As you know, the Port and City staff have been working collaboratively over the past few years on the first phases of redevelopment in the waterfront, including environmental cleanup, parks, roads, design, and now we're moving into construction. So Waypoint Park, which was previously known as Whatcom Waterway Park, is a city-led project under our 2013 interlocal agreement for facilities. It's about a 1.7 acre park. We've briefed the commission on this before. It's located here between the Granary building to the right, the future Granary Avenue on the bottom here, and then Whatcom Waterway. The 2013 interlocal agreement for facilities really only contemplated upland work, so work above the ordinary high water mark. And that was the original intent for this park and project, but early on in the design, the Port, City, and Department of Ecology all recognized that there was an opportunity here to remove a vertical bulkhead, pull the beach back, create a softer bank kind of beach element that you see on this figure. And that does a couple things. One, it pulls out treated wood from the aquatic environment. It pulls the beach back that's a softer bank that supports a finer grain material that's better for fish and aquatic habitat. And then it also, of course, presents a better public access to the water. So based on those considerations, the Department of Ecology actually provided us with a $150,000 grant to pay for the engineering, design, permitting, and a little bit of the construction of the beach element, but not all of it. So, and then since the 2013 interlocal agreement for facilities didn't really contemplate in-water work, Port and City staff have developed the proposed interlocal that's before you today for consideration. that will split any residual costs associated with the beach construction 50-50 between the port and city. So the city's actually already bid the project here and awarded it to Strider Construction last week. All told, the whole project is about just over $2 million. But they bid it with two different bid schedules. One was bid schedule A, which was all the upland work, the main park features, the hardscapes, the playground benches, all the plantings, all the stuff that's in black and white on this figure. And then the bid schedule B was the beach elements. So that was the things that would apply to this interlocal agreement. And that's all shaded, the area there is shaded in blue. The bids from Strider for Schedule B came in at about $300,000. So based on a 50-50 split plus about a 10% contingency, we have a not to exceed of $154,000 for a port contribution towards the beach. And this is in the 2017 approved budget under a capital project. Staff recommends approval, and I'd happy to answer any questions.
Gentlemen, any questions?
I have one. What, they gonna put gravel in? What are they gonna?
Yeah, it'll be a finer grain material. Right now, there's some kind of 2-inch sized rounded cobble that are out in the waterway right at that bulkhead. They'll pull the bulkhead back, pull the slope back even further into the upland. Well, you can see it here to the limit of where the blue is, and then they'll top that off with more rounded gravel and then a softer sandy gravel on top of that. It won't be like a really fine beach sand. It's not made for that environment. But it will also have some larger groins on the outside that help contain that and keep it in place. So similar to what you see out at Boulevard Park, maybe a little bit finer grain material than that even though. So it'll be a nice beach, but it's not going to be an ocean beach.
And then I know earlier on, I believe last year, we talked about issues of that washing away from the swell that comes in on the southeast there. What are they gonna do to?
Yeah, so they've actually done a fair amount of wave modeling in this area. This is actually a very ideal spot because it's fairly protected right at the very head of the waterway there. There will be some wave action that comes in there. We had a large storm a year or so ago, and the coastal engineers that were designing this went out and watched it to see if they saw things, and so that's some of the containment that they've then designed to help keep it in place a little bit. The other thing is that it kind of comes and goes. I don't think it would just suck it out and wash it out. It would be, there'll be some changes over time, and they might have to replenish it, but I think that the design is so it would stay in place. And so that's why it's not going to be a really fine grain material. It'll be a little bit coarser.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Commissioner McCoy?
Thank you. And clear representation of the statement that persistence pays off. So I'm glad to see that there's a beach happening here, and I'm glad that we can participate in doing it. And I'm glad that some people in this county who have been asking for something like this for a long time are going to see it happen, and it'll happen very soon. So
Yep.
I very much appreciate it.
Excellent. Yeah, the construction, since this bid's already been awarded, they'll probably be issuing a notice to proceed later this month, maybe early November. Construction will start with this work being done in this fish window. So it'll be done and open hopefully early spring.
Super cool.
Yeah.
People will be able early spring to park their car down there, launch a kayak from there and paddle on out?
That's the hope. Yep.
Great. I guess it's too late to rename it Stoner Beach after your predecessor?
I think
I
so.
always thought that would be a good name. for
It
that.
is Waypoint Park officially. Yep.
Waypoint Park.
Crowded beach.
This is great. I'm really glad to see this park come in. That's wonderful.
Good.
So, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you,
That
Commissioners.
passes 3-0.
With one abstention.
Thank you very much.
You betcha.
Looks like you're up for the next one. Diane, if you could, please.
Authorize the executive director to execute a development-ready certificate between the Port of Bellingham and the City of Bellingham for the Waypoint Park project pending no substantive changes.
Thank you, Diane. This is a development-ready certificate that is similar to, it's related to the same project that we just spoke about. It's similar to the development-ready certificate that the commission approved at the last meeting for the Granary Avenue and Laurel Street right-of-ways. It's essentially a certificate to the City of Bellingham assuring them that no additional environmental cleanup under MOTCA is going to be required in the footprint of the beach. And as you know, we've completed the Whatcom Waterway Phase 1 cleanup. This is all part of that. That's all work that is done and complete. but we have yet to receive our final certificate of completion from the Department of Ecology. So, and the reason for that is not because there's additional work being done, but if you took the whole Whatcom Waterway cleanup as a whole, it's a much larger than this small footprint, and they're under the review of our as-built report, which has a lot of information in it. So they're reviewing that right now. We've actually received comments. We expect to have that wrapped up here soon. So in the meantime, this development ready certificate assures the city that no additional works are going to be required in the footprint of their project. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
I have none.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioners.
Passes 3-0. Thank you. So we have one more action item, item number 4, if you could please, Diane.
A motion to authorize the auction of a seized derelict non-flyable aircraft N6721N pursuant to resolution number 874.
Sorry.
Sorry?
I said, oh, that one. I was like, which one is it? It's that one.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Aaron Collins, General Aviation Supervisor, Bellingham International Airport. Give you a quick presentation on this item at hand here. Basically, a derelict aircraft is one that is safe for flight. It is airworthy. Examples of an aircraft that's unsafe for flight would be if it's missing large structural components, engines, wings, things like that. Additionally, it must have a certificate of airworthiness, which is required by federal regulation. So here's a little history. In August of 2016, BLI adopted a derelict aircraft policy, which prohibited derelict aircraft from being stored on the airport. The following month, on September 6th, the Commission approved the 2017 BLI tariff schedule. As the Commissioners may recall, embedded in this schedule was a derelict aircraft fee. So therefore, on January 3rd, 2017, airport staff identified 7 aircraft that were derelict. We issued violation letters via certified mail, copies by email, phone calls, however we could to reach out to these tenants. This was very successful. We had 6 of the 7 aircraft immediately removed by the tenants. These are some examples of aircraft that were being stored on the airport. As you can tell, some are missing engines, wings, no tires, and severe skin corrosion. All right, the item we're talking about today is the last remaining derelict aircraft. It is a 1968 Mooney fixed-wing 4-seater. A few illustrations, take a look. It's been sitting there for a while. The tires have actually eroded off of the aircraft, and it's now sitting on the rims. So here's the timeline of the aircraft. As far as we can tell, the aircraft came to us on November 1st, 2003, when the tenant entered into a tie-down agreement. The aircraft remained there grounded for the next 14 years. We started, as I said before, by sending a violation letter via certified mail to the last known address in Linden, Washington. It was unclaimed. Airport staff found another address 2 months later in Anchorage, Alaska. That certified mail came back refused. Over the next several months, I personally was in contact with relatives of the tenant to try to contact this individual, and it was unsuccessful. So on June 16, 2017, the aircraft was seized by port staff pursuant to the authority of RCW 1408-122 for non-payment of port tie-down charges, late fees, and derelict aircraft fines. It's the Aviation Division's recommendation to authorize staff to sell this aircraft to try to recover general aviation charges. If you do authorize the sale, what we'll do is we'll advertise the auction in the Bellingham Herald. We have to do that for 20 days as required by the RCW. And then we will have an auction at the airport scheduled for November 9th, 2017. It's important to note that this auction can be called off if the tenant shows up, pays all late charges, fees, and fines, and removes the aircraft. That completes my presentation. I'll happily answer any questions you may have.
I have none.
What if the tenant shows up, pays the late fee, pumps up the tires? Why did you say they have to remove the aircraft?
Because it is unflyable, sir. He will not be able to take off on it. So what he'll have to do is pull the wings off, load it onto a flatbed, we're assuming, and drive it off port property.
So are people allowed to work on their planes when they're in the tie-down area, or do they have to remove them to a hangar or off-premise?
The latter, sir, yes, they would have to remove it to a hangar.
So the one with the engine, how long was without an engine? How long was that sitting there without an engine?
Unknown, sir. As long as I've worked for the port, about 3 years.
Who was paying the bill? I mean, it's only $1,000 out of in arrears.
This is the interesting part, Commissioner. The tenant keeps paying the bill. Unfortunately, he's paying the 2003 rate. So over time, he has accumulated additional charges and fees and late fees. Even odder, I guess, was the relatives actually hired a private detective to find him due to me reaching out to them. And due to the tenant's nomadic existence, they could not find him.
Oh, well, that makes a lot more sense then, okay.
But he still made the 2003 payment fee each month?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Up until when?
He's still doing it from what I understand, but he sends them via money order with no return address.
Well, that was my next question, okay.
Sneak attack.
So before you sell this aircraft, I'm assuming you're going to look inside of it.
Yes, sir, I have.
I'm really interested to know what's inside of that airplane.
Besides wildlife, sir, not much.
Wildlife.
It's a weird thing to be paying on for 14 years when, anyway, that's all I got.
So how much was the payment per month?
It was $40 in 2003.
So every month they paid $40 since, wow, huh.
That is correct.
That's it.
Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, we got 40 minutes, so I suggest we move up the 2018 budget and quarterly review if we can.
Fine with me.
Sure.
Okay. So we'll move to the, which was the last presentation, the strategic budget update.
I vote for Aaron giving this presentation. That was hilarious.
It's the deadpan that makes it good, right?
It's great. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tamara Sobczak, Director of Finance. I actually cut this presentation pretty short. I thought we were going to be very, very late, so we'll have plenty of time for this. We've got the financial results for the third quarter 2017, as well as just a brief budget update. We've been over this a few times. I thought we'd start with the quarterly reports that Commission requires, the stormwater program coming first. We actually have two stormwater permits. The first one's out at the airport. This is the one we've had for quite some time. Consistent attainment was achieved in the third quarter of 2014, and recall, samples have not been required until later this month, so we'll report fourth quarter samples for this one. We received a new stormwater permit issued for the shipping terminal. We sampled the third quarter. There was one benchmark that was exceeded, and corrective action was immediately taken, and we are now in compliance. And we are in compliance with record keeping for both of those permits. Next is the safety reports. We didn't have any additional injuries the third quarter of 2017. We've had 2 year-to-date. Both of them were resulted in some lost work, so both the recordable incident rate and the lost workday rate are at 2.03. Next, the public disclosure information. We received 33 requests in the third quarter of this year for a total of 115 requests year-to-date. Staff time to fill those requests is over 165 man-hours at a cost of $11,500, which includes legal fees and staff time.
How does that compare to last year?
We're higher than we're on track to be higher than last year. I think we're about 140 year-to-date. Yeah, and what people are requesting, a third of them are bid-related documents, the tabulations, the results of the bid, things of that nature. 27% are miscellaneous, fuel flowage reports, sponsorships, just really random requests. Oh, excuse me, 21% HR finance. These are labor agreement, salary information, things of that nature. 12% recurring. We have an ongoing request for the CCTV coverage at the airport. And then we have a requester that randomly or periodically requests our purchasing records. And then 7% engineering drawings and studies. So that's what the public is interested in seeing. Risk management activities, I'm happy to report there were no major incidents in 2017. Knock on wood, if you don't mind. And there are no new claims for or against the port in the third quarter. So moving on to the financial part of the presentation. The first 9 months, this is the balance sheet. Total assets ending at almost $393 million compared to last year, or compared to 9 months ago, $393.5 million. Total liabilities obviously decreased to $144 million, leaving us net assets of $248 million and $248.7 million, as opposed to 9 months ago, $247 million. So increasing net assets. Our current investments, we have about, well, not about, we have $15 million in federal investments, and these give us an average yield of 1.25%. The balance of our investments is in the local government investment pool, and that pool has increased the interest rate up above 1%, which we haven't seen in a while. It's 1.13 at this point. So where did the operating divisions land first 9 months? Revenues have come in at $17.4 million with a budget of $17.2, so a little, just slightly higher than budget. Expenses are lower than budget, 10.3 to an 11.3 budget. Looking forward, we're projecting to end the year revenues 23.1. This is just the operating divisions. And then we're budgeting 24.3, which is about a 5% increase for next year, over projected. Expenses projecting 14.3 million, and then we're budgeting 16.2. The wild card here is the marine terminals, the shipping terminal, you're aware. So we'll see what happens there.
Hey, Tamara, the difference between the 14 and the 16 seems to be higher than 5%.
Right, the revenues grew 5%. The shipping terminal is quite a bit higher in expenses as well as the waterfront, yeah. And like I said, I made this presentation pretty brief, so I'm not going to go into detail with all the divisions, the airport and marinas like I normally do. But I did want to bring up the waterfront district because that's kind of a major one for us, and it's not in the operating numbers. So we'll end the year about 300,000, I'm sorry. First 9 months, 300,000 revenue to a budget of 200,000 revenue. Expenses are quite a bit lower at 650 as opposed to a 787 budget. Looking forward, we're projecting to end the year about $330,000, and we're budgeting next year about just under 500,000 for revenues at the waterfront. Expenses we're also expecting to increase quite a bit at 1.1 as things get moving down there. This is the same slide that I presented 2 weeks ago. This is about our tax revenues. And Commissioner McCauley, you had expressed an interest in having some time to discuss with the other commissioners about what we wanted to do for 2018. And staff does need a couple of questions answered. Number one, does the commission want anything over $5 million going toward the waterfront, like it has the past several years? Staff's recommendation would be yes. And then the second question is the commission interested in raising the tax 1% like we did last year, as well as taxing new construction? The answer to that is yes, that's what's in the budget.
The 1% is in the budget
It
now.
is in the budget, correct.
Yeah, the drafts you've seen to date and the cash flows you've seen to date include that 1% increase.
A year ago, we did it because of the requests we had, public records request, and that was an added expense, and it was all for the public. So what's the thinking this year? Is that going to increase?
Well, everything over $5 million goes to the waterfront, so this addition would go toward the waterfront costs.
I would bring up with all the infrastructure repairs we're faced with, every time we look around our waterfront, so on and so forth, and the cost of everything going up, that I think we need to move forward with that.
What, AV, what's AV?
Assessed value, countywide.
I do want to rethink the amount above 5 million going to the waterfront. Now, Rob and I, we've talked about this several times over the years. Maybe at least 2 years ago, we were talking about shifting away from that way, and we still haven't gone there. Is there a good reason why not?
There's just a lot coming down the pike over the next couple of months, including security, the things that are going with opening of the site or bringing the public down to the site. So we're anticipating a lot of additional expense next year, including some marketing and some promotional of the site.
So that, I mean, just from the standpoint of what the commission can choose to do with the budget, we don't have to leave anything in excess of $5 million available for that. But psychologically speaking, I think it says a lot that extra money goes there and it's kind of off limits. I'm totally comfortable not doing that and just keeping everything in the big pot, because it's essentially, other than the environmental budget, which, Brian, there's some specific money in there that's set aside. I just don't see any reason to continue to set it aside. And anything that comes up would just be as important as anything else across the organization. But
How much is the increase for a $300,000 house? If I remember a year ago, I thought it was 60 cents, but it was really 6 cents.
It's just a couple dollars, I think, the increase. It's minor. Yeah, it's not $6.
No, it's definitely not $6.
No.
It's a $300,000 home.
Yeah.
And what's our levy rate? 29?
26, 22.
22.
It's there on the slide.
Right now, a $400,000 house is taxed for the port at about $72, I think.
$300,000 home is $78.66. So if you took a 1% increase, I guess I'd, yeah, you can figure it about 8
cents per
8 cents.
thousand.
80 cents.
80
cents per
cents.
thousand?
78 cents. 78 cents. It's not, it's not that, quite that simple, because we turn in a lump
Right,
sum to the
right.
county. Okay, just so we're clear.
Yep, I'm clear on that.
Well, my point about the BWAS fund, it's just an internal thing. It's not that really germane to the overall budget. The 1% increase, though, I'd like to have something more specific, a more specific reason for asking for that than just because. So if there's a good reason for it, then I would be in favor, but.
Well, I wasn't saying just because, I mean, you look at the projects we're faced with, and it's everything, I mean, we can't pay for everything that needs to be fixed now. A lot of stuff needs to be fixed. So,
I'm inclined to not take it.
Okay, we'll present you with a draft. The next draft will show it without the 1%.
It's about $70,000.
Yeah. But tax new construction, because that's an option as well.
Well, is it, you turn in a lump sum, and then they're going to include new construction or not?
You get to decide. We can decide whether we want to tax the new construction. It's a line item on that.
Yeah, I thought in the past we
did.
Yeah,
We've done it both ways.
we didn't have it in there, and there was an increase every year because of the new.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm in favor of that.
Bobby?
yeah.
Mike, did you say mm-hmm?
Oh,
you
yeah,
say-
that's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
So take
Yeah,
off the
it's sort of-
1%, keep the new construction?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is, the final vote on this is in November,
Second meeting in November.
second meeting, okay.
21st.
Thank you.
Great. So we've talked about the capital quite a bit, so I didn't want to rehash all of these things. But I did want to mention there were 3 changes made from the last meeting. Commission asked us to move the Fairhaven building to 2019. We've done that. That's reflected in the budget documents that you have. We also added a reserve for future economic development of $1 million. And then we moved the 3rd railroad crossing out of unfunded into the 2018 budget for $550,000.
Excuse me, what's the Fairhaven building?
Seaview.
Seaview.
Not Fairhaven,
Maybe
it's,
north.
yeah, it's
Yep.
right here.
Okay, thank you. I just
Yep.
wondered if
My
I was
apologies.
thinking of the wrong building.
No,
Thank you.
A quick-
I was.
A quick comment on this, because we moved money from 18 to 19 to, I can't remember what we accommodated with that.
For this
Yeah,
request?
yeah.
That was the funding for the economic development, which I'd like to spend in Kendall, and the railroad crossing, fully
That's right.
funding in 18 would come from the Seaview North building, that 2.4 million.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So by moving Seaview North to 2019, you don't eliminate the 2.4 million expense, so it actually is increasing our 5-year cash flow by 2.4 million, and so it's not balanced, because there's no new source of funds in 2019 to magically pay for that building, right? So we moved it from 18, brought in a bunch of new expense in 18, moved it into 19. So the net result of that in 2 years is we brought in an additional $1,550,000 of expense. So at the end of the day, the cash flow, is it still positive?
It actually is still positive. Where we were going to go negative is 2020, but we moved a few projects from 2020 to 2021 to get that bottom line to balance.
There you go.
But we do know that there's a sale, excuse me, in order for Harcourt to do their next building, there will be a sale of property soon.
That's in, I believe we have the 2 properties in the next 5 years. There
So
could be a
those-
third. I
Those
think.
can more than backfill this expense and
Well,
cover.
they're already in there.
They're already
They're in
included.
here as sales.
Yes.
Yes.
Why are we including money property we haven't sold?
Because we're pretty sure we're going to sell them. So we're trying to forecast the future here. We include anything that we think is reasonable. We try not to do speculative revenue, but at this point, we're pretty confident that's going to happen, and we don't consider it to be speculative anymore.
In 5 years, in the 5-year budget.
But
But
it's
only
in,
one of those properties, we would know for sure. Anything else would be speculative.
I don't think so. My talks with them is we're pretty far down the road on 2 properties with them. I believe we'll sell them 2 properties in the next 2-3 years, if not in the next year.
All right.
Commissioner McCauley, I have a question on the doing something in the Kendall area in lieu of a building here on the waterfront that might create some jobs. What exactly is it that you're thinking of in Kendall? Do we have a project that we in mind, or?
I think so. So to respond to the jobs in the waterfront, so a new building for Seaview North would theoretically add capacity there, but we don't know what that would actually be. And there is a revenue source, and the port would get money back from that revenue source. But that's an existing company, they're a profitable company, they're doing well, and we can bump this out a little bit further. Again, back to my point of, if we have extra money, I would like to see about building good, strong businesses, the infrastructure that they need, because the port's going to get the money back anyway. So my position on that hasn't changed. When it comes to Kendall, though, and I had a conversation with the chief of staff for the lands commissioner today, and I really want to, and I'll fill you in because we're having a meeting next week, so I'll fill you in on that conversation. But if you look at Whatcom County, there are hundreds of thousands of tons of biomass that are literally just rotting away. So if you look to the east end of the county, where we know we have the highest rates of childhood illness, we have the worst air, we have the highest rates of unemployment, this is a place that the Port of Bellingham can make an investment to help create jobs. So in Kendall, what I would like to see is that we do a very basic business park. It's focused on biomass because that's what we have in the east end of the county. So when the first time I brought this up, people were like, why would you want to invite outside companies to go all the way to Kendall? I don't want to. I want to look at the resources that we have available in Kendall and around Kendall and see if there's a possibility to create some sort of a new economy out there, because it's already there. They have the material there. So that it needs to be fleshed out. The Department of Natural Resources folks are very interested in this conversation. One of the things that we'll also be talking about next week is the cross-laminated timber. They are really interested in working with communities on that, and there's about 3 in the state right now that are having the conversation. One of the questions I had of the staffer at the DNR was, are we too far north to be a player in cross-laminated timber? And the answer was no. So even there's a possibility. The thing we've got to do, though, is develop these, whatever that economy might look like. And this is why I asked if we give it to the new economic development director, they'll have staff that can go dig into every one of these questions and either answer them as, yes, it's a thing that we should do and help encourage out there, or it's a thing we should take off the table and focus some other place. But if we don't answer the question of whether we should or should not do it, then the answer that I think will come to, and has the commission has constantly come to, is we don't know the answer, therefore we do nothing. And I'd like to get some
Well,
answers.
I certainly don't mind getting the answer, but when we have a chance to create some jobs right here, right now, and that is, no one has come with a proposal. There's no private entity that needs a business park up there or says they do. It's more, if we build
There's
it,
been
they
one.
might. So I would certainly entertain it if they brought it forward. But
See,
I
they-
haven't seen it come forward.
This
at
is
all.
this is where I differ from a lot of other philosophies. It hasn't happened, so the reason that it hasn't happened is because we haven't done anything, or it's really the chicken and egg, right? Or is the reason it hasn't happened because it's not worth doing? Well, nobody has actually answered the question, therefore it never happens. And if we answer the question, and I've been seeing this happen here the entire 20 years that I've lived in this community, there's a question, it's answered, it looks great, nobody puts a budget to it, it sits on a shelf, right? So I would like to say, let's give it a budget, and it sits there. And when the question is answered, then we know there's money to do something. As opposed to, we've got an answer that looks positive, but there's no way to fund it, and nothing ever happens.
Okay.
I'm good, back to you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Dan, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I certainly understand where you're coming from. And the Birch Bay community has some interest in doing some stuff out there, but they need to bring forward, would it be a public-private partnership? What exactly is it they want to do? Have they, as a community, prioritized what they feel they want to do? And I haven't seen any of that from Kendall or that area. I agree, there's problems in that area, and economic development would help them. But I'm not sure we set money aside at this time in lieu of jobs that we can have right here in the waterfront within the year.
Those jobs are already here, though. There's no jobs out there in Kendall. This would be real job creation in a place that needs the jobs versus supporting an existing business that, can wait another year or
Well,
can
and I
go
would
borrow money
agree,
and build their own building.
if they had something in mind, then I wouldn't mind setting some money aside, but I haven't seen that.
Well, I'm going to get back to a point, though, that I made starting off is, if we, and this is my philosophy here, if we have extra money to build a building, then we should look hard at building the building. I don't believe we have extra money to build a building right now because there are other priorities that are of higher importance. That business, if it needs to expand, can borrow money and can build their own building, which was the agreement that they made with the Port of Bellingham over a decade ago, and they haven't done it yet. So I'm not criticizing them for that, but there's no reason for the Port of Bellingham to go out of its way to fund a building when we don't have money, when there's other things that I believe have a much higher important need for funding. And if we have the extra money, or we can develop a source of funding for that building, then I would definitely think that we should look at building those buildings, because it was a proposal that I made last year when we started talking about All-American Marine. If we can develop a fund that will build buildings, then I think we should do that. But right now, I believe we have higher priorities. Thanks.
Continue.
All right, so projected cash flow, this is the budget as you have it. Obviously, I'll take off that 1% and we'll get a different number, but projecting to begin the year with 22.4, add in 47.7 million. This is all in property sales, taxes, revenues, all that. Uses of cash, 56.7, again, all in debt service, capital, expenses. Projected ending cash end of next year, 13.4. And Commissioner McCauley, this is where that $1 million lives in our budget. It's in that reserve, so 10.9 as opposed to 9.9 presented a couple weeks ago. That would leave us at the end of 2018 with about $2.5 million of unallocated cash available for something else.
So as you can see, it's getting pretty tight. We like to keep a bit in the bank. We do have a reserve to cover rainy days, but if it's really rainy days, we're not going to be able to sustain spending 10 million more a year than we're bringing in. So we have to really analyze that as we're reducing revenues and increases expenses, because that's been our trend over the last year.
So let's talk about land sales then, because apparently we're looking that far out with Harcourt.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any reason to not sell all of the property to them now? Every acre that we've signed an agreement to have them develop?
Well, I don't think they're ready to buy it all now. Our agreement with Harcourt isn't a put. We can't tell them you must buy the property now. It's more of a negotiated agreement where when they present a project, we approve it, and then they buy the property. They're going to present to you today several projects that account for the cash that we have in here for the upcoming sales. But until they're ready to tackle or take on the next project, I don't see them being willing to pay for the next project. They don't have the certainty they're going to get approval to develop it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they could come to you with a project, and because they have to come to you with each individual project, they could come to you.
That's part of my point here. When we signed the agreement originally with Harcourt, I was very uncomfortable, and these were all private conversations, so I won't share too much, but I was very uncomfortable with this phasing of it. Somebody pointed out to me, and I don't know if they're right or wrong, that theoretically, the last project wouldn't happen until 2034. I don't know that it's that far out, but it certainly feels like it could be.
I'd point to the Barclay development, which has taken 20-plus years, and
Sure.
it's still not fully built.
Yeah, but the difference here is that if the port doesn't own the property, right? So all of the projects would go through the same exact process with the city of Bellingham as they do whether the port owns the property or or doesn't own the property. So at the end of the day, it still goes through the city of Bellingham's planning departments and all of their processes, and essentially the final say rests at the city. But with the port ownership, they have to come to us first. They have to ask us if we're okay with it. We line up all of the processes that we have, and then we send them on to the city. So the problem is two things. One, they have to start with us. And, are we developers? It's just a process. They convince us that they've got a good program, and we say yes. And the second thing is that we sit on the land, right? And there's no incentive for the project to move any faster than what is written into the document, which is quote unquote market conditions. And I think that's the sticking point that I've got right now. Is I would like to see if we can move that property to them much more quickly than the otherwise, because if we're looking at the second, would be the third project sometime within 5 years from now, that's quite a ways out. It doesn't change anything for the Port of Bellingham. If they own the property, the port owns the property, it's still 5 years out, right?
Why would they want to buy all that property when they aren't sure they can develop it at this time? Why would they not just buy what they thought they could develop?
Well, if I was them, I would love this deal, because it doesn't cost them anything to own the property without actually owning the property.
Sure it does. They're going to have to, first of all, they got to come up with the capital. There's a cost in coming up with the capital. So the only way you're going to sell them all the property now is at a discount. You're not going to get the same price as you're allowing them to phase it in.
But think about this, though, right?
They're also going to have holding costs. They're going to have property taxes.
They have no holding costs because the port holds the property.
Right now, but if you sell it all to them, then all of a sudden they've got holding costs. So their
But
costs.
that's the private risk that a private company would take to develop, this awesome waterfront, right?
It's not the agreement they signed up to, so you're going to.
I know. I'm just saying it would be nice if we could move that property more.
Well, if they wanted to
quickly.
buy it, we would certainly sell it, if that's
I
your
think
question.
I would be okay with that conversation.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm not saying pull the plug. I'm not even close to that. I'm just saying it would be nice if they would be willing to take it, then I would be That would be a preferable situation. Then we could pay for some of these fancy things that Macaulay wants to do on the other end of the county. I don't know what predicated that conversation. My apologies for that left field there.
Well, I was talking about how we're getting pretty skinny on cash.
Oh, yeah,
and we
that's right.
We seem,
Didn't I just solve your problem, though?
One thing we need to keep in mind, right now, the economy's pretty good. And so we do need a rainy day fund, because it easily could rain. So, I mean, right now, when the economy is as good as it is, we shouldn't be spending all our reserves. We should have some in reserve. And I'm not saying 2.5 is the number. I think I'd be comfortable with a little bit more in there.
yeah, me too.
Okay,
We digressed.
it's perfectly fine. Next steps. So we'll have the budget on the website sometime Monday, and also a hard copy at the front desk if people want to come and take a peek at it. And then in 2 weeks, or really 3 weeks, November 7th, we'll come back here, do a public hearing for anyone that wants to provide testimony to the commission. And then on the 21st, we'll do another public hearing, and we'll ask the commission to adopt the final budget. Any more questions or discussions, anything we didn't talk about?
Commissioner Briscoe? No, I'm good. I think we kind of talked about them all the way through it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, do we want to recess? I see we had a speaker that signed up. Do we want to wait for the public comment at the 5:30 time? Or do you want to have public comment now?
I would prefer to stick to the agenda.
Stick to the agenda, so at 5:30, we'll have open public comment again. And do you gentlemen want, I guess we could tackle the waterfront. Do we want to do that or not?
Well, I did have, see Mr. Reese came in and he did sign up to speak and he was way late. I mean, if it's got time to do it before, or maybe he doesn't have time to do it now.
I would agree if he wants to let him do it now. Or,
I'm good with that.
Phil, what do you think? You want to go now or you want to wait till 5:30?
It's, gentlemen, it's your call. I'm good either way, whichever you want.
I'd just soon go now then.
All right,
If you'd like to, I'd just soon have you speak now
right.
in the
Okay.
public comment period.
I appreciate it.
We'll reconvene the public, or reopen the public comment.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate you putting me in.
Can you come to the microphone, either one,
Right.
please? These are being recorded, and we want to make sure that folks in TV land can,
I brought some good reading material along with me today. Have all the commissioners seen these renderings that I produced back in '07?
I have not.
Okay. Rob, can I give them to you?
Want me to stand here and be Vanna White?
So, thanks for letting me speak, out of order, appreciate that. Sorry for my lateness, I was
You gotta walk
dropping
back and
off
forth.
a huge load of, yeah, that's a good one right there. That's the reason why we need a building, because we only could fit the stern of that boat. We did an extension on that particular boat, and then there's another nice little beach saner. We did probably about $140,000 of work on it. That stern extension was, and a lot of other associated work was just south of 200 grand on that job. So there'd be a lot of projects like that. That's a rendering of local outfit we worked with. They're no longer in business, unfortunately, but Karen is her name. She did all the renderings, and we have lots more. But these were the photos and the renders we used when we went in front of the city to get a rezone, which we bore on our own nickel. Yeah, and the port also has somewhere in your files, I have a copy of the engineering drawings for that building that we provided on schedule. And then that's another picture of the building. The purpose of those renderings is to show the size of the building, the style of it, the color of it. All those things were used in order to get the rezone, which once again we bore on our behalf. It was zoned 35-foot level, and it's now rezoned to 60. And only in that section, everything down until you get down to about this area is 35. So again, we have, I've been on record for years now, and I just brought two of the piles. This is all correspondence I've had with staff over this building. So while I just want to make, this is all different separate email trails, threads, etc. I'm a paper guy still. I still like files. I can't find the stuff half the time, but I still like hard files. In any event, the purpose of me being here today is to basically come before the commission and try to sell you folks on a building. We just completed a huge process through the Port of Seattle, of which I've been a 45-year tenant. I'm going to be taking delivery of the largest, outside of Delta Marine, the largest travel lift in Seattle in about a month. It'll be the largest travel lift besides Delta, which I'm not Delta. I don't have a 400-ton machine, nor do I have the space for it. But I do have a space that we're going to put an 80-ton machine in. It'll be the largest in Seattle. And the only reason I'm doing it is because I have a willing landlord that allowed me to expand and also expand my footprint of my yard and also a building. So that's exciting. The reason why I was late is because I had to drop a huge load of steel to Seattle Galvanizing in Arlington. Otherwise, I've been here on time. All for the new pier. So back to our task in front of us here. That's the renderings. We've spent north of $100,000 between engineering drawings, renderings, the rezone, et cetera. I've been on record on that on multiple occasions. I believe it's a game changer for this community. Those projects that I show in one of those photos, it's just one of many that will come. And I have, right now we have, as everyone knows in this room, we have a 150-ton machine. The spec when I bid for the facility was 100-ton. And in between 02 and 04, I lobbied to the Port of Bellingham to increase that pier, of which I paid for, in full, on a 9% ROI. And it's been renegotiated to a lower rate, which we all agreed to. It's a fair deal. That being said, we knew that 150-ton machine was the better machine. At that time, the only large machine in the area was at Port Townsend, 330-ton machine. That was our real competition at that point. Since then, there's other people who have bought and put in bigger machines in Canada and in Anacortes. So knowing that this was on the horizon, I mentioned that 80-ton machine in Seattle. I'm actually negotiating right now for a 220-ton machine currently that I believe will help facilitate larger boats and more boats. We have a 4.5-acre parcel at that facility, so can't, but those buildings will come down if that building is built, and that'll increase our capacity. Right now, we're hamstrung by our capacity of the yard and the capacity of the machine. With a new building, that landscape will change. Our facility in Seattle, I think I'm on record on this, we are a 60-person crew between all facilities. They travel back and forth, but pretty much stay in their respective camps. And then, so that's the purpose of me being here. Those are the renderings. I've invested a lot of time and effort in that. And I'd like to work with the port to get a building built, because at the end of the day, I believe our workforce will double. It's not going to double the next year. We're going to have a hard time finding skilled workmen. That's going to be our biggest challenge. And it's industry-wide, nationally. But I can tell you right now, I'm motivated to do that because I strongly believe that it will be an addition to already a strong staff here now. We pay family wage jobs. I know that's kind of a catchphrase, but I've been doing it for a long time. I've been paying medical and benefits to my crew and profit sharing to my crew for over 30 years. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we have a real strong workforce working, and I'd like to add to that. And I think it's necessary.
What's your workforce now? Oh, how many people do you employ here now?
It hovers around 30. Yeah, in the slow season, we're just hustling for work because a lot of it's outside. That's the reason why we took over the former Padden Creek site, which went in and out of business. I can count on one hand how many times they went in and out of business. We're there and building, but that's the reason why we acquired that site, because it had inside space. And if we get the size of vessel into buildings here, it'll be a game changer for not only Seaview, but for the entire maritime business up here. We do a lot of work with subcontractors. A lot of subcontractors use our facility. And we welcome that. It's part of our charter. It's part of our agreement. We have the same agreement in Seattle. And just to put a little icing on the cake here, I believe, from the audio that I saw from the last commissioner meeting, that Anacortes is a vibrant community. I believe Bellingham is a vibrant community. And I think it'll become even more vibrant. If I didn't think that, I would never come to Bellingham. I'm a strong believer that there's a lot of opportunity up here, and a lot of people will come. And because I've been told it repeatedly. And with the icing on the cake, BST and Associates, his name is Paul Sorensen. Many ports have contracted with him over the years. His most recent study was commissioned by the Port of Port Angeles. He came to interview me amongst many other port tenants. I was just one of them. And he called me up twice to make sure he had the numbers right. The numbers he was talking about is the amount of haul-outs that Seaview performs at its facilities is almost double of its competition. I have had staff come to me, namely Steve Shipman. God bless him. I hope he's doing well. I checked in with him about a month ago. He said, Phil, he says, staff and I was talking about, we hear those machines beeping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If they're not moving, they're not making money. So we handle more boats between our three facilities than anybody in the state. We handle about 3,000 boats a year. That's impressive. I'm proud to say that. So when it comes to being vibrant, I believe we have a vibrant marine community up here. And I think I can build on that. So I've said my
Okay.
piece.
Gentlemen, any questions?
Phil, I've got one quick one. Several years ago, you might recall, I mentioned it. I would like to see a new travel lift pier built down in Fairhaven to replace the old one that's there with a 300-plus ton capacity. If there was a 300-plus ton capacity travel lift pier down in Fairhaven, could it be put to work?
Well, and then when you say, yes, we talked about that a long time ago, my answer will be the same as it was then. In our lease, if you dig into the guts of Seaview Fairhaven's lease, I assume you're talking about that site.
So Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park, but nothing to do with your lease. It's about the state of the economy in regards to the vessels that size.
What site are you talking about, Mike? Are you talking about where Fairhaven is now or out further where the shipyard is?
North of where the current pier is, where there used to be a pier there, now it's gone, so it would be north of there. The old one would come out.
Okay. And are we talking our site now?
I don't understand what you mean, our site.
Well, the site that I leased from the port, are we talking?
No, I'm not talking anything about your lease at all. I'm just talking about that capacity of a travel lift in Bellingham Bay serving some business, potentially yours.
Well, I'd have to look at more of the site plan. I'd have to look at the availability of the amount of land. You'd have to look at zoning. You'd have to look at what the height restrictions are. I've been told the height restrictions are problematic at Fairhaven. At least that's what I understand. That's the reason why you have a tenant just down the way here, I think. So I'd have to look, without being able to give you a rock solid answer, I'd have to look at what are the possibilities for number one, the site and the height restrictions.
So
for
a
that site.
machine of that size, though,
Last and final, Mike, at one point, the port approached me to move Seaview North to a location close to where All-American is now. And they got me involved in it because they wanted to know my input. I've only been hauling boats for 45 years. That's not a very long time. But anyway, they asked for my opinion. And I said, it's too much exposure. So my answer to you right off the bat, because I've looked at sites all over Washington, Oregon, and California, and there's a lot of exposure down there. And that's the reason why I suggested don't do it up here, because the exposure is too great. You'll risk damage to the boat and frankly to the persons. So I said, boy, I'd shut that down with a country second. Unless you have a breakwater, unless you have some means of protection, the wind action, the waves, and what have you, you just can't haul boats.
you're talking about the same location I'm talking about where you're already hauling boats.
Pardon me?
You and I are talking about the same location, though, and you're already hauling boats there. How's the exposure impossible to haul boats? We're
I
200
can't
feet
haul
offshore.
boats at certain times. I just can't haul them.
Well, that's the nature of geography. You can't change that, right?
Okay, well, I can only answer it this way. There's a reason why we handle as many boats as we handle cumulative between our 3 yards, principally 2. The third yard being Fairhaven is tidal dependent, big one, and weather dependent. And there'll be times where for example, we do a tremendous amount of work with Explorations Northwest. And I'm very grateful for that, but there's times we just got to shut it down. Can't do it. So that kind of puts a monkey wrench to the thing. And I frankly, I'm about to turn. You know, we handle a lot of boats every year, and if I was weather and tidal dependent, it would be extremely difficult. to
So
stay on schedule.
we've got the ability to pull 50-plus tons down at Colony Wharf, 150 up at your site at CV North, and a 300-plus ton unit would put us in competition with.
That would add a problem. If you want to talk about that, talk to Port of Port Townsend and Port of Port Angeles. They're banging heads all the time, and it's been a problem for them. And I know
What's been a problem
I knew
for them?
Townsend Bay very, very well before they went out of business.
What's been a problem for them?
Huh?
You said it's been a problem for them? They're banging heads over what?
Well, they bang heads. In other words, they're competing for the same customer a lot, and so and there's just so much capacity. So it's some if let's say for example I put a 220-ton machine in, which I'd like to do.
You're doing that in Seattle, though, right?
Pardon me?
Aren't you doing that in Seattle?
Yeah, man, listen to me, Michael. All due respect, that's 80 ton in Seattle, 220 here. I don't have. 80 ton is in Seattle. It'll be taken delivery in November.
Aren't you
It'll be
buying
the
it?
largest machine in Seattle.
You said
Yes,
you're
sir.
buying a 220.
I'm sorry?
Didn't you say earlier you're buying a 220? In the presentation before we started questioning it, you said you're negotiating to buy a 220-ton travel lift
I'm
somewhere.
getting a little confused here too.
Yeah, I'll break it down one more time.
Sure.
In Seattle, outside of Delta, the Seaview West machine that I'll be taking delivery in November is 80 ton. That's it. In Bellingham, if a building is built up here in Bellingham, I will replace my 150-ton machine with a 220-ton machine in Bellingham.
On these piers that we have already?
Right.
Okay.
And I'll never, it'll still fit the same piers. no different than what I'm doing in Seattle. I'm going to go around the same piers. But what it's going to do is going to give me some latitude. I'm not going to change the footprint of the pier. That'll stay the same. But it'll give me the latitude to pick boats better and differently. I have to turn some away because I can't get them picked correctly. The type of machine I'm going to buy is a BFM machine, which allows me to get the top house and rigging and what have you away from the top beam. Right now, I don't have that latitude because of the sling placement. So there's more the reason for the machine is it gives me more flexibility to haul a different style boat without running into the top beam. And I've had to turn people away because of that. Can't get a proper pick. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. How are you gonna do button up against Pacific Marine and,
How what?
how are you gonna do butting up, as you speak, head to head with Pacific Marine and of course in their new yard they've got going?
We're doing fine right now. We'd probably do better with the larger capacity machine. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. You look at.
I mean, the building, they've got a new paint building too.
You know, the building they have down there is not new. It's been there for years. By no means is it's friendly to, I mean, I've been in it. I've looked at it. It's an okay building. It's no different than Platypus's building or Townsend Bay's building. It's a big building. Well, the design of my building will have proper airflow, heat systems, all that. What I devised with my small building in Seattle will be replicated in some form up here. But right now, I can tell you, I know all the paint facilities around. They're not to the state of the art that they could be. So, and I know what they do inside. They individually tarp and tent and cover, and it's archaic, honestly.
Although they've rebuilt it and it's environmentally controlled with the doors that now
Well,
do
that-
open all the way so you can
Okay.
take in, so they can drive the travel lift right into that
Okay.
one.
Well, that's the building that I would like to
I'm
see.
just curious how that competition is gonna affect what you
It'll be
want to do
good.
here.
Yeah, it'll be good. Yeah. But the first thing has got to be capacity and inside of the building. And I'll, have I answered your question, Commissioner?
Okay, anything else?
No, thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, gentlemen, we want to take a 15-minute recess?
Yes, please.
Okay, we are adjourned. We'll reconvene the meeting. First item is public comment. Has anyone signed up back there? No one has signed up for public comment? Okay, so we'll move right into our first item. Just to let you know the order of which we're going to do things, we're going to have a waterfront district update, and we've already done the budget, and then we'll have Harcourt do their update, and then we'll have other business. So since there is no other public comment, we'll have a presentation on the waterfront district update. Sylvia? And if you could, if there's, if the two Pats could go to the podium when we're speaking, or anyone, we would appreciate it. It's easier to see on the TV.
Wood Planning and Development Director, and I would like to give a short update on our planning charrette that we had yesterday. The port, the city representative from Harcourt, and 2 urban designers from Pennsylvania all joined us yesterday in this room. We made some good progress. So I will give an introduction, and then I'll turn it over to Harcourt's architects, who will show you the details. We started by reminding ourselves of our big picture goals for the waterfront. This is nothing new. We've been for 12 years now trying to connect the downtown of Bellingham to the waterfront, restore public access along the waterfront, create a park and a trail from Granary to Cornwall. And actually what we have been trying to do all this is connect interconnected parks and trails through the entire waterfront, but we've had some focus lately on a trail or a park interconnected from Granary Avenue or the new Granary building all the way through to Cornwall Beach. We're trying to create sites for jobs, housing, commerce, public facilities, and preserve the view corridors. So we're just doing a fine-tuning of the waterfront plan we already have, and we're still working towards the same big picture goals. So the issues are illustrated on this one sheet. The biggest issue we have right now is we have 2 access points to the site at Granary and at Laurel. We have a very small access down at the south end where Wharf Street goes around the corner and up the hill. We need a 3rd access, shown as the red arrow, and that's just a conceptual access to get from the main part of the site up to the downtown part of Bellingham. And that is going to be the 3rd access, and that is one of the things that this plan amendment we're working on now needs to accomplish. The green dotted line is the general conceptual location of where we would like to have some pedestrian access through the site all the way to Cornwall Beach. We looked at the 2016 vision plan. And as we've been saying for a year now, there are some adjustments that need to be made to that vision plan to make it accomplish the goals we're trying to accomplish. The access to downtown from the waterfront, there is not a connection on this, this site. Let me see if I can get the... No, I'm not going to try to draw it on there. At the location of Bay Street, where the red arrow was, is where there needs to be, in that vicinity, there needs to be another access. That earlier plan did not have a vehicle or a physical access there. It just kind of went to the edge of the bluff and stopped. So it was a visual access, but not a connection. We want to improve access along the bluff. With that big park through the site, it was difficult to get to the development pads that are between the park and the site, unless you want roads through the park. So that was a challenge that we've been working on for a while. The alcohol plant, the Port Commission has indicated that we want to save the alcohol plant or at least evaluate it for further adaptive use. And the Bay Park proposed in the earlier vision plan goes right through the alcohol plant. So we've looked at, can we jog the park or the open space in front of the plant or behind the plant or realign it so that we can preserve that alcohol plant. Whatcom Waterway Park needs to be a little bit bigger than it is shown on the old vision plan. We've actually worked through that issue with the city, and we have sites for 3 viable residential pads now along the waterfront park, and the waterfront park is as large as it was previously. So we've resolved that issue. And then the commission has indicated they'd be okay with a small bike pedestrian trail through the log pond, but not a park of that size. So we need to adjust the size and the shape of that park so that it was a little closer to the cogen site and isn't quite so large. So those are the issues that we have been working on with the city and with Harcourt over the last year, and we focused on those issues during the charrette.
Please.
Yes.
So this image we're looking at has a lot of assumptions. One of them is that, what's that green dash line? Is that the railroad? No. Is
The
it?
green dash line is the future railroad, and the other railroad is shown, not, you don't really
Not on
notice
that
it,
one.
but it's through the site now.
Okay, it also assumes the alcohol plant is still standing.
This assumes the alcohol plant has been demolished. The alcohol plant's not in this picture.
Right, okay, so I just want people to be clear, there are some assumptions here
Yeah.
that may or may not end up
No,
in the...
this is
yeah.
not our vision plan now. This is the vision plan that we've been working on for the last
Sure.
year that is not ready to go yet.
So-
This is our starting point.
Okay, so there's one yes vote for retaining the alcohol plant. What is your eliminate road near BNSF? Where's that at?
Right now, the board mill, the Bay Park has frontage roads on either side, and the frontage road along the back of the alcohol plant or along the back of the park is very, very close to the Burlington Railroad.
okay.
You can't have a road intersection that close to a railroad, or you have a situation like we have out here on Roder, where cars are backed up trying to get over the tracks.
And the larger Whatcom Waterway Park, that's already been done, though?
That has been
yeah.
resolved, yeah,
Okay.
by eliminating that 4th residential building and making the park a little longer.
Okay, and then the conversations regarding the area called Log Pond here, it's on this drawing would be what we're talking in the future developments, which is currently set aside for the shipping terminal. So the smaller trail through Log Pond would be that's from Laurel Street over to Cornwall?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had that conversation with the commission before, and I believe you have all 3 said we don't want to park that large through the log pond, but you could manage a smaller bicycle pedestrian trail through it, is what I heard you say.
Sure, and I think some conversations have been along the lines of something around 50 feet wide? Is that-
Yep, that's
okay.
what we've been talking about.
Okay, for now.
For now.
Okay.
And then when the railroad moves, it could get bigger, but we'll get to that.
Okay, thanks.
We got the railroad moving.
The railroad, we still think might move, but not this year. So the question that we looked a little deeper into is, do we really need a 3rd access point? Do we need a road or a bridge at Bay? Do we need a parking garage at Bay? Or is the site have enough capacity with Laurel and Granary? And the answer is yes. In the future, we will definitely need a 3rd access point. If we have any kind of urban density on that site, the blue areas shaded on that map far exceed the capacity of those 2 roads. So before we get to that much density, we will need a 3rd access point. Now-
Sylvia, what does the 3rd access point do?
The 3rd access point would increase the number of cars and pedestrians and bikes that could enter and exit the site so that you could have more development. Otherwise, the 2 exits and entrances choke.
So when we talk 3rd access point, we're strictly talking about a surface street.
It would be a bridge, or it could be a bridge entering into a parking garage.
Okay, thanks.
So we did look at the possibility of a road from the top of the bluff at Bay. It could slope straight down to Laurel. We've also talked several times over the years about just having a road into a parking garage that does not connect all the way through. Or we have the commercial bridge that's currently in the plan. And those are really our options. I didn't show them all three on here. And those were kind of the assumptions that we started with on the charrette yesterday. And I'm trying to get through this so that we can actually show you what we came up with, because it's pretty exciting. We talked about if we have a vehicle connection at bay and it goes into a garage, we also want to make sure that we have strong pedestrian connections. These are a few examples of pedestrian connections that bridge large elevation changes. We have about 34 feet at that bluff, and if we want people to get down to grade, there's an elevator up in the far right that came from Seattle. There's some staircases and some other options, parking garage with a staircase and a green roof on it that we saw in Portland and in other areas. So that's something that we need to think about if we do have a road that comes into a garage, making sure that we have a good way for pedestrians and bicycles to get down to grade. And then the last issue that we've been tackling is view corridors. The yellow lines don't show very well on this map, but the view corridors right now being angled go across a lot of the potential building sites. And we're wanting to start, as we shift the grid and update the plan, we want to revise a few of those view corridors. There's 3 that are problematic, and we could replace them with 3 others, and those are conceptually the ones that we're looking at. So next step, we will show you the results of what we discussed yesterday. The port, the city, and Harcourt need to do some further technical study on the railroad crossings, the railroad alignment, view corridors. We need to then submit a plan amendment, and we need to revise the facilities agreement. And we're going to talk about these a little more detail, the timeline for all of these at the end. So what I would like to do now, this was just to set the stage, is to have our architects from Harcourt show us some of the ideas that came out of the charrette yesterday. I think you'll like them.
Before you
John-
leave this,
Yes.
supplemental EIS on the view and access, and we've got to make this application by, in 6 months. So notwithstanding the other technical issues, which I think can be quickly come to or find agreement, the supplemental EIS, though, has a somewhat different process. How do we manage that and get it all done in 6 months?
Well, we were hoping to use the EIS that we had from before would be much easier, but if we do a supplemental EIS, we just need to start on it and work on it quickly and get it done by April. But yeah, it's very doable because we're not starting over. We've already analyzed views. We've analyzed many different road options, including the straight street grid, the angled grid, and the alternate view corridors. So we have to summarize what is our updated preferred alternative once we reach one, and then what would be the impacts of those alternative of the changes that we're making. And we would look very narrowly just at traffic and just at views. Okay. So I think we would take the EIS assumptions that we had before, update those. We'll probably need to hire somebody to do that. It won't be a thick document. We're hoping about a thin document that really just has a view analysis and a traffic analysis in it.
Okay, and so for the work product from before, well, this would probably predate my time on the commission because there was a conversation about the street alignment that looks like what we're talking about now.
Right.
So that was already
Yeah,
done?
in 2008 and in 2010, we looked at the possibility of a road at bay coming into a parking garage, and we estimated the capacity, and we also looked at a road at bay coming straight all the way to Laurel, and we looked at this grid, and we looked at those view corridors. So we've looked at most of this before. It's a matter of updating, dusting off, and fine-tuning that analysis, because what we're going to propose is probably not exactly what we were looking at before.
Okay.
Each one has a little variation we have to look at.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I will escape this, and John, okay. And show. And yours is right. Uh-oh. Can you pull it up? Okay. David Seitz.
David Cease.
Cease.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we just met yesterday, and I keep getting John and David mixed up. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, David Cease with D2 Group's Architects.
Welcome.
We've been working with Harcourt. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Really what I want to go through right now is outline the process that we went through with the different representatives from the city and the port and the parks yesterday, along with Harcourt, of course, and really illustrate how we're trying to build on the work, the large body of work, honestly, that's been done to date, and bring it along to the next level, refine it, start to make it something that's more real and more tangible, something that can really start to move forward. So I know that some of the discussions or questions, I should say, regarding the project to date are, if we look at the existing conditions here, are kind of what's happening now, what's happening next. So, of course, the first thing the first project that is already in place and underway is the construction of the two streets, Granary and Laurel. That's illustrated here. But I just want to present very, very quickly the other four main sites that that Harcourt is going to be focusing on in the very near term. The first is this residential site that's immediately adjacent to the waterfront. The next would be a hotel that is in addition to the board mill building, the existing board mill. The third parcel here represents a student housing parcel. And this is actually potentially slated for student housing as well as an assisted living and memory care facility. And then this fourth piece here is what we're calling the Gateway office building, and kind of calling it that because it sits, of course, immediately adjacent to the Granary building, which is in fact the project that's already underway. But it starts to form literally a gateway into the new development. So those are the near-term construction goals and project goals for Harcourt. And want to kind of take a step back, though, and again, talk about the process we went through yesterday. And again, thinking of this in the both short-term and long-term, what are ultimately the goals for the project and how do we achieve those goals? So again, coming back to the existing site, as Sylvia discussed or already kind of presented, we discussed yesterday the three access points into the site. The two access points are already approved and are part of the sub-area plan. One is down at Laurel, the other is over at Granary. And these three symbols at this point represent vehicular access. We do realize there are other potentially pedestrian access points, specifically along the central pier here, crossing over, but really focusing on the vehicular access, and then we're going to talk about some additions to how we really get into the site. So again, like Sylvia sort of mentioned, definitely spent some time yesterday talking about the connection at Bay Street. What does that mean? And from our perspective, part of what we tried to do is understand why that's important. So Bay Street and the connection at that particular intersection really has a strong visual and physical connection back to the existing downtown. So you've got the Arts District over on Bay Street, and then you've got the State Street corridor going out towards the mountain area, both of which are either very lively and active right now, or are kind of up and coming and are continuing to grow. So then, just taking another step back here, looking at the Laurel Street, wanted to reiterate the importance of that connection as well, and the connection particularly up to the farmers market, and of course all of the other activity that goes on in and around that particular area. But really here, it's not, we didn't just talk about Bay Street. I don't want to give that impression. And then, of course, the third would be at Granary, adjacent to the Granary building. This next slide here, in addition to access points, the other thing we spent a lot of time talking about and is going to be an important part of the development are the existing site features. It's a really rich site with a lot of history, and the goal would certainly be to keep as much of that and really play on as much of that and build that into the fabric of this new development as this development grows down at the waterfront. So the first piece I've highlighted here is the alcohol plant. The intent is for, whether it's all of that or part of that, to stay. The intent is that that stays and becomes an occupied building. The second piece, as we saw a few minutes ago, is the board mill building, with the intent to turn that into a hotel and possibly convention center of sorts. The third piece here are the tile towers, which are really just an incredible site feature. And as an amenity already exist. Again, the history is there, these things are there. We want to celebrate them and really incorporate them into the fabric of this park and development that we're trying to create here. We also have the acid ball, which is in the works for a public art piece, as well as the other digester tanks. The intent is to reuse those and piece them around the site, again, to kind of integrate them into the whole development. We can't talk about this, I think, without talking about and recognizing the train tracks. For the time being, we are assuming that they're not moving. If they do move, of course, we've got that kind of accommodations for that in the works. But the reality is they're there today, and we're working around them as an existing site feature. So those were the sort of site pieces that we were working with. Our goal yesterday was to identify and understand those as a group, but then take those and ask the question of how do we design around those site features? How do we design something that starts to connect back to downtown? And what sort of shape does that take? How do those places start to get formed within the site? So we've got the result of yesterday's discussions are in the form of sketches here. We didn't have quite the time to develop some fancy images, but I think we are getting across the ideas. So, of course, the existing site, I already mentioned that we have Granary and Laurel as givens. We also have the alcohol plant, the board mill building. We're showing the tile towers here, and of course Granary building up in the north corner. So if we take a step back and not necessarily think about space making just yet, but understand how do you move through the site. One of the critical pieces of this project, as Sylvia mentioned, is the connection back and down to the Cornwall Beach Park. So our goal is to move from the Cornwall Beach Park up and through the site, as you talked about, that potentially 50-foot right-of-way or 50-foot wide trail system. But how to bring that up through the site and to the waterfront in a meaningful way. We started to look at those site features that we looked at a minute ago. So as you come up to the site from the Cornwall Beach Park, first thing you're coming up to is the alcohol plant. And so our intent is to bring you up and then start to use different pieces of either the existing architecture or possibly some of those relocated pieces of artifacts, if you want to call them that, to create stopping points. So as we come up towards the site, we're using the board mill and then potentially some sort of an artifact here. We're also, of course, using the tile towers as a node, as a gathering space. And then from there, orienting you towards the waterfront and with visual cues and a view, but also with physical access. So the more we, okay, those are some very diagrammatic and conceptual ideas, but what does that mean when it starts to take shape? So this slide here represents potential development areas that work with and around that pedestrian and that public park that we're trying to define. So, you know, besides just the pathways and landscape within the park, one really major aspect of any kind of urban park like this is going to be how do you define the edges of that park. So this slide here really starts to talk about the development that we expect or we think could start to happen around that park, around that pedestrian traffic, that start to define edges, start to create some spaces and really define the place of this downtown park. So again, really the development focuses around the park. This is starting to illustrate, you know, how the parks, or how the pathway rather, could come up and into using stopping points here. Again, the tile towers orienting you out to the waterfront. Going back to the very beginning and the kind of immediate, or I'll say near-term development, we start to overlay those projects on here with the granary building in the north and the residential buildings, the hotel, the student housing, and then the gateway office building. And then as time and the site develop, we start to fill in around the park and filling in those other development areas. One thing I really want to focus on, though, of course, is this new connection point at Bay Street, or at the Bay Street Bridge. What we see here is the area that's highlighted, we really see as a street level extension of Bay Street. So if you can think about the Bay Street itself continuing to the intersection with Chestnut, but then extending into the site, at that point you're elevated roughly 35 feet above the lower waterfront site. And so we see this as a terrific opportunity to bring Bay Street in, connect the Arts District down in a very direct and literal way. But then at the end of this, you've also created an amazing vista that looks out over top of this large plaza, part of the park, part of the trailway system, but establishing and creating these vistas, this great view, as well as a physical connection. It very easily could be something that at the end of that Bay Street Bridge, again, it's a view, but there's also a connection down. Some of the slides that Sylvia showed had these interesting ways of connecting pedestrians from one level above down to the level below. We also see a great opportunity here for the creation of some terrace seating areas, balconies, that kind of thing that, again, overlook the park. And it's really about creating a place that is down at the waterfront level, that is this park, but it becomes something that doesn't just sit there isolated. It's connected back up to the downtown visually and physically. Here's a quick sketch, but we think a powerful sketch, honestly, that shows what that could look and feel like as you're standing on Bay Street. So this is standing on Bay Street. Chestnut is in front of you. The building on the left and the building on the right start to frame your view back, obviously, off to the distance, but also you've got the two tile towers that are going to be rising up just off of center from the actual view corridor itself, which does two things. One, it opens up and allows the view to extend beyond, but also it starts to lead you over to that area and then down into the park itself. The next series of slides here, it's one thing to talk about drawings, of course, but we wanted to just run through, and I'll be very brief with these, but run through some real-world examples of how Harcourt and we and the city and the parks potentially see this thing taking shape and really looking and feeling. So I'll just flip through these without much comment. This talks about the streetscape and really bringing a lot of activity to the streets and the downtown fabric. Again, it's about activating with storefront, retail, commercial, cafes, restaurants, engaging the activity of the pedestrians with the buildings, with the construction and the development, so that these are activated not just from 9 to 5, if they're office buildings, but really 24, well, maybe not 24 hours a day, but 7 days a week, we'll say, and into the evenings, as people, not just who live and work here, but people from the rest of the town are coming down and being able to use it. And that is the last slide. So I'm just going to back up and leave it on this one, because I think this kind of pulls together all the ideas that we discussed. So if there are any questions, I'll leave this slide up for a minute, but that's where we left yesterday.
Thank you. Do you have any questions at this point?
Tara, to say a few words?
Sure, please.
Good
Welcome,
evening. Tara Sundin, I work for the City of Bellingham. I just wanted to share a few comments with you about our experience over the last maybe a little more than 24 hours, and also talk to you about next steps. And I have Rick Sepler here from our team. He's the planning director and is able to address any specific questions you might have about the process for amending plans or EISs, et cetera. But what I do want to say is when the city staff saw the vision plan that was created a couple years ago by Harcourt, we felt like it had a lot of strengths. It had some things that we liked better than the adopted plan. And those, from the city's perspective, were a connection, a very strong connection through the entire site. That's something that the city had really wanted, and so we really liked that feature. We love the fact that Harcourt is interested in redeveloping the board mill building. We don't have very many buildings left on this site, and they're underway with granary, but more than that, they were interested in retaining the board mill, and that's why we looked at realigning Laurel, because board mill was shut off from the street system. So we liked that feature, and then we liked the reorientation of the grid system. So that's what the city staff went into this charrette wanting to see happen. And I think actually what's been achieved in our team, we met again today without this particular team present, we feel like this particular feature, park feature, addresses that strong connection that gets us through and to Cornwall Beach Park. We recognize that the port is going to be using the Log Pond area and the shipping terminal for light industrial purposes for the near future. And so we recognize that we might not get a full park experience through that area, but we really would appreciate some consideration to that 50-foot kind of trail access. And then we think that this Maple, this actually, I don't think anybody's mentioned it, this park aligns with Maple Street in our downtown. It really sets up not just that connection, but this kind of more intimate park experience, a real urban plaza experience, not just shoot you through the site, but you can get through the site or you can pause and enjoy the experience. We also think that this is going to work quite nicely for this interim period. I don't know how long it's going to be that we have railroad tracks in the current location. The last time the city did a cost estimate, I was reminded by our Public Works Director this morning of relocating those tracks and raising Cornwall. It was about a $50 million price tag. So it would be lovely. So anyways, we think for all those reasons, we're definitely supportive of moving in this direction. And I think I got a real sense that all of the city team and our team included the park staff, Public Works and Planning, and the port staff and Harcourt, we all kind of came to agreement, I think, rather quickly. And so I hope you enjoy some of these features. We are going to be refining a few things, and those include, like Sylvia had mentioned, the view corridors and looking at access and transportation needs. The city needs to amend the sub-area plan, the waterfront district sub-area plan. This is just one piece of it. If you recall, there's 5 planning areas that we're not talking about all of them. This is the downtown waterfront area. But we do need to amend that plan to illustrate Bay Street as that connection rather than commercial green. My understanding is it's also going to require a change on your part. I think it's called the Scheme of Harbor Improvements. So you'll be taking action as well. With that comes some minor changes to the development code, and then the other documents that we jointly approved, the facilities agreement, the development agreement. But once we get past this piece, we think things will fall in order. So we're expecting that the port and Harcourt, as the landowners, will make application to the city. Our deadline is April of next year to meet up with the next plan amendment. We've let Harcourt and the port staff know that if you get that in earlier, we might be able to process that amendment in 2017 because we don't have others in the queue. Our city council can only amend our comp plan once a year, and so we'll be able to do that probably next year if things move more quickly. So a few comments from me. I think the whole team's ready for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tara. Any questions?
Yeah, I do. Tara, if you could indulge me again, I didn't quite understand the process you just spoke to. You said it could be done possibly in 2017, but then you alluded to 2018.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Time is getting away from me.
So
We're almost at the end of 2017. If you get the application in sooner, we could process it in 2018. If you apply for the April 18 deadline, that's really setting you up for a 2019 adoption.
okay.
So
Thank you.
a plan amendment does take, because, and just to note, we haven't talked about public process. Public process is really important as well. And there's requirements for meetings throughout that process for you guys, I'm sure, and also for the city. So last time we took the plan forward, it did take 12 months from application to adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner McCauley.
Mr. Cease, could you show 2 slides later than this one? It's the one with the one more? Thank you. So I thought I understood that the Bay Street would be at grade, I assumed it was at the existing grade. So this view looks like it's down below the bluff versus up.
So I'll answer that by going back one, but I'll say that the intent is not to change the grade of existing, the existing grade of Bay Street, rather to elevate on the side of the development up to the existing Bay Street elevation. And so the way that we would intend to do that, or way that we see that happening, if I pull that arrow away, is really what we see happening here is that you drive down Bay Street, and once you cross over Chestnut, you are now driving essentially on the roof of a parking deck. So it pushes the parking down to where the parking is kind of tucked in against the bluff, and it also is acting as a buffer to the railroad. But when you come across there, yeah, you're on the top of a structure at that point, which has elevated you up to the height of the existing Bay Street elevation. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. It's just like that one there looks like I'm standing
Yeah.
on the street.
So this
Below.
building that's on the left-hand side there, what you're not seeing of that building is the 2 or potentially 3, 2.5, 3 stories of parking structure below that.
I'm a huge fan of that. Can you go back a slide? So I'd like to comment on the building down on the bottom of this, the zigzaggy looking one. That was mentioned, you don't have to answer this, I just want to make a comment. So it was discussed as student housing, assisted living, and memory care. I would like to make a pitch on behalf of Western Washington University and suggest that the building would have more value to the region overall if we could find a way to put condo units or living space for young educators that are having a hard time finding housing close enough to Bellingham to be willing to move here and work for the university. So if that would be a consideration, I would definitely advocate that you talk to Western about that, because they've been having recruiting troubles because of the cost of housing here, and their pay for their first-year professors is not the highest. And that would have a lot of value for, clearly for the region, because they draw from quite a distance away, and they're growing. I do have to, is there a slide, Sylvia, you might help me here. Can you find a slide that shows the serpentine-looking park?
Minimize this one, and that is, that's not this one, is it, Brian? Right above the L, right here? Oh, got it. Move around. That would be this one right here.
Thank you. So this comment's going to seem negative, but I'm really just looking for an answer. All right, so for over a year, we've been talking about something that looks somewhat like this. And as late as last month, I was advocating on behalf of that particular park with my fellow commissioners and trying to get a gravel path built through the area from Granary over to Laurel right away at a port expense. So this meets what Tara said as sort of the connectivity through and across all the way to Cornwall. So this seemed reasonable to me. I'm not trying to redesign this, but this seemed like the path forward, no pun intended. And like I said, we've been talking about this for about a year. Can you go back to the new plan?
Yeah. Here, you want to pull that one back?
No problem.
And yesterday, the entire thing was moved to this. So what we've been talking about for a year is out the window, and in the last 24 hours, we've come to this. So there's a public process in which we have to explain this difference to essentially the public, how we got here, why the old plan that we've been talking about and people have been seeing for the last year is now gone, and why this is the path forward, and this is the preferred path forward. That's going to take some time to people. I'm not criticizing this plan at all, but we do have to explain what happened in the last 24 hours, how we went from something that we've been looking at for a while to this, because this is very, very different than the other plan. So just a comment I wanted to make.
Yeah. And we actually built into our process that sometime towards the end of this year, well, this tonight televised is the beginning of that public process. We'll have several, once we flesh these ideas out, we'll have several meetings, Port Commission and City, to where we can brief the two commissions and the council and the public on it and even get input. This was a sudden change yesterday, but it was a sudden change as a result of a year of somewhat frustration that the other plan, the the Bay Park or the Serpentine Park we've been talking about wasn't working very well. It crossed the road up at Granary, at the Granary building, very close to the intersection where there isn't a crosswalk, and it needed to move over. It created a kind of a wall of park through the site. We didn't want a lot of roads through the park, but it landlocked all of those buildings along the bluff, and then it also went right through the alcohol plant. So there were some problems that we've been trying to work through. It wasn't a sudden shift yesterday. It was a matter of a year of discussion about how do you get the cars through the park? What do you do with those properties along the bluff? And the idea that the properties along the bluff would be difficult to develop as just anything other than parking because of the railroad noise. And then the big issue was the traffic, the access at Bay. The Bay Park, as close as it was to the bluff, there was barely room to squeeze a single parking garage behind that park, and you couldn't move it over much because of the tile tanks.
I do need to take issue with something you just said, though, Sylvia, and my apologies doing this publicly, but you said this wasn't a sudden shift yesterday. But until about 10 minutes ago, I hadn't even seen this. So to me, it's a pretty sudden shift, and I think that
it was a sudden shift yesterday. We hadn't seen it until yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It
I don't know
was a
who's been
sudden
talking about
shift.
it for a year,
Yeah.
but none of us
Yeah.
have.
No, we've been talking about all of the issues relating to
The
the
issues
existing
relate-
Bay
okay,
Park.
okay,
We came up with this idea, actually Harcourt's architects came up with this idea, and it didn't look this good yesterday morning. It looked this good overnight.
All right. Thank you, Sylvia.
Sorry, the shift was away from the Serpentine Park because of all the issues with it. It wasn't towards this until very recently.
Right. Yeah. Just want to make sure we're really clear, because this is a different plan, and I think people need to understand how this came to be so that there's a broad understanding. Like I say, I'm not trying to redesign this. I have an interest in making sure that the bones of this are in the best place, so the streets and that sort of thing are done. What happens in the interior portions between the streets is, cities, I have a belief that cities grow in a bonsai kind of pattern. They're never done. They grow, they fall back, things are built, things burn down, so it'll change. But I do think we got to be really clear about how we got to this particular change. So.
Agree.
I think hats off to everyone involved that have put two scenarios in with the railroad tracks in two separate spots. And to come together and all work together, we need to try to, if there isn't one thing I've heard from the public, it's try to keep this on the fast track. And so anything we can do to start working on the public comment, the sooner the better.
Impressed. I think it looks very doable, and the two gentlemen in the audience, Pat and Pat, are the people that I think should have the final say in, and I think you're in agreement with what's going on here, I would presume. I do, however, from the middle of Myrtle Street going south towards our shipping terminal, I'm curious how we grew a green serpent over there, because we never had a green serpent there before, but that bothers me. I wish it wasn't in there, because it indicates we're in agreement to put park area over there at this point in time, and we're not. And we will hear about that from the folks that utilize the shipping terminal now and in the future. And hopefully it's not going to go away very soon. So other than that, I think there's been some great work done. My hat's off to everybody, the city and Harcourt and the port staff and the architects. I think you've got a very, very workable plan here for what I know about it. I'm not a developer. That's you gentlemen's departments, but it looks good. Let's keep moving. That's what I want to do.
Can I offer it's not a solution to what you brought up, Bobby, but there's an agreement, the current agreement we have with the city is, when does the industrial land at the shipping terminal?
It's based on square footage of build-out. So when you get to, I think we call it phase 3 of build-out, that you start adding additional parks and other infrastructure.
Right. So as a it's not a workaround. I think it's a potential solution to the point Bobby raised right now. If something similar to that could be agreed upon to go in as the phasing occurs in the future, because the assumption of the phasing is that the that the city's going to grow in there. There's going to be maybe changes, the use at the shipping terminal. I do want people to know, though, that there's pushback, at least from, I think, all three of us, but there's some pushback on that part because we've invested about $6 million in the terminal in the last few years, and we've got a couple million more that we want to invest. So we want to maximize the use of the shipping terminal for Whatcom County as long as we can, but also recognizing that this phasing is going to push against that someday, and the terminal might turn into a different use at that time. So if we could have something that said, a park like this is going to happen during the phasing at some future point, but in the meantime, we have that 50-foot sort of right-of-way path along the railroad tracks. If we could come to agreement on that, I'd be very supportive.
We're not proposing to take the trail and take it through the shipping terminal. The idea is that it would come out, because we're only talking about an interim trail right now, which is to follow the tracks and come out onto Cornwall. You're just close to Cornwall Beach, but not go into your secured shipping terminal site.
Okay, very good. Who's next up?
I think that's all we have for the waterfront
Presentation over?
presentation.
All right.
Yeah, yes. So,
Two Pats,
Pat, did you want to say anything, or? It's all said. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much. And thanks for all the hard work. Thanks for all the cooperation that all of you are jumping into. Our next item comes up is other business. And
An item, if I can. There's been some federal legislation proposed, which would basically put an import tax onto solar cells. This would be huge. We believe this would be hugely detrimental to to iTech, our local solar manufacturing. It might double the cost of their panels in production. We don't have this is pretty last minute, and I apologize for that. We don't have a letter prepared for you to sign, but I'm asking your permission for me to send a letter to our federal delegates and to the president on behalf of the port that says we oppose this import tax on these solar cells. I'd be doing that in conjunction with TAG, our local technology alliance group, and probably as well with our solar company.
Can you give us some background on this? Do you know what the bill number is?
So it's the source is Forbes magazine, and I apologize because I don't have enough copies for you all. But
Is there a title to the article?
It says, the president has put initial emphasis on cutting red tape so energy infrastructure projects can move forward, but he may soon need to take a hard line in a major dispute that threatens the health of the domestic solar industry. I will send you a link to this or scan it and get it off to you. But it was both in the Wall Street Journal and it was a Forbes article. Wall Street Journal did an editorial just this last Monday, if you want to try and find that.
Are you reading an article right now?
Yeah, sorry.
Is it written by Jeffrey Dorfman?
I don't see the author on this. I'm reading an email clipping of the article, so I don't have the whole thing. I apologize. This was just sent to me today.
and did iTech bring this to our
Correct.
attention?
Correct. Well, TAG brought it to our attention, but I believe iTech brought it to theirs.
Sure.
Well, I'd love to send a letter, because they'll just blow us off anyway, because that's how Washington DC treats us, but.
Well, but I think there's going to be a push for a number of individuals in these industries and their communities to write the same thing. so.
It's fun, literally, how many times have we applied for
You have
Tiger
faith in the
grants for like, this
process?
tiny little port, get lost, right? So.
Was
yeah.
that faith in the process, I heard?
Good faith. Yeah, yeah. Well, we're small potatoes,
Well, this-
right?
yeah.
Right, but I think we should pile on this. Let's take a good hard look at it. You bet.
It's a political decision, so I leave it in your hands. It's certainly not a business decision.
I vote send the letter.
Okay, thank you.
gonna
And I will,
read
of
it.
course, copy you on it. I just didn't have it done in time to get to this meeting. This was,
We'll see the draft.
you'll see the final copy if you're authorizing me to write it, because it will be out before you have another meeting to approve it.
Okay. Good. You okay with that, Commissioner?
Yeah, give them a plane ticket, change yourself to someone's door out there.
Very good. Okay, other business. Anyone have any other business?
You got anything, Bob? You got anything?
Yeah, I do. A couple short things. In Blaine, our north and south piers, we just rebuilt those to the, I forget what the tune of the cost was. But one of the reasons they decayed is over the years that people that lease the piers stack totes of crab on them, live totes, and they fill them with water, and it just runs all over the pier. Instead of having something to catch it, shove it over the edge into the water. So all this water is running over the top of the pier, over the tops of our pilings, and we've just rebuilt that, and I think, you know, we need to do something. Right now, we have one live wire that's going on. So we need, I think, I would like to maybe ask staff to look into it and maybe see if we can address it. I don't think it.
Some sort of drainage? I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, what they do is they're lining the totes along the dock there, the north pier right now. And then they'll fill the bottom there with crab, and it's got seawater they're pumping right out of the bay right there, goes into the totes, and it just runs over the totes all over the dock. So I'd like to see them put some kind of containment that just shoots it out over the edge of the dock back into the bay, instead of just having it running all over the piers we just rebuilt and consistently wet. I mean, not that it's not a wet area we have anyway, but I don't think we need to add to it continuously like we're being done. And I think it'd be a very low-cost thing to do, pretty simple.
Okay, thanks.
The other thing is, the docks over at Seaview North between, Shirley, help me out here, the people that are renting the buildings at the south end. I forget the name.
That would be Ocean Air.
Right, between Ocean Air and Seaview's buildings, we have the piers along the road there. They're falling in, they're in disrepair, and I think we need to start talking about addressing that in some way. And I'd like to get that conversation started at some point in time as part of our infrastructure, and it's actually a mess there.
Is that on the unfunded budget?
A portion of it is budgeted for 2018, but we were going to use it for overwater coverage. So in conjunction with the fit-up float, because a portion of that property is not under lease to Seaview. The Site D is in the possession of the port, which is the most dilapidated area. But the other piece that Commissioner Briscoe is talking about, I am happy to work with Mr. Reese on, and he still is in the audience, and I'll be happy to circle back with him.
So the part that is that's not under lease, it's not against the Ocean Air. The commission has made a decision to do something with that?
Yes, it's actually in the 2017 budget for demo, but we were holding off for a variety of reasons.
I guess what I'm asking is the prior commission must have decided to demo that, because I don't recall talking about
We haven't brought an action to you to demo it yet. We've just budgeted for the item to be removed because we needed the overwater coverage to do the fit-up float.
So to explain why is, there has been a request by people like Brian, thank you very much, to Ecology to say, we're going to take this thing out, can you give us a bank of the square footage? And Ecology still hasn't agreed to this process.
I got it.
Therefore, it remains in place, rotting away, because that's the process now. So if we take it out right now, we don't have a bank that says we can re-put
I
it.
know
in.
that.
Yeah.
I'm not of a mind to take it.
Yeah, because it is frustrating to watch it rot away, but knowing that if we take it out now, we don't have a bank that we can work against. So, yeah.
I would like to look at keeping that and replacing it at some point in time. It's pure coverage. It's pure, once we take it out, we're not going to get back there. It's in our inner harbor. It can be a fit-up, though. It can fit right into Mr. Reese's plans with the building and the larger boats coming in there for finished fit-ups alongside that. That's what it did for years and years and years when I grew up here. I don't believe taking that pier out and just leaving a rock jetty along the road is going to make anybody any money. And as we see Seattle growing, everything's growing, we don't have a lot of places to grow. If we take stuff out and we can't put it back, then we've lost that area of workspace within our harbor, inside the breakwater.
Can you please go to the mic?
I'd be happy to. If I avoid the one carry.
Well, it won't onto the YouTube. There's a mic right here too.
Oh, boy, front and center.
There you go.
Okay, so I believe you're talking about parcel D.
That's correct.
I believe that's what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
You know, and that's a real critical turning basin right there. It's it's difficult to turn boats right now as it is. And so, when we negotiated the lease initially back in '02, that was part of the lease premise. And so we put in, I think the number's about $100,000, the floats that are down there right now that a lot of vessels tie up to periodically. Tacoma's down there right now, tied up. So it's really critical that at some point gets taken care of, because we tie up boats along that and work on them.
So you're saying that what I would like to do, you're in agreement with?
I'm sorry again?
You're saying what I would like to do is preserve that piece of pier you're in agreement with?
Yeah, I mean, up there on the fixed dock, which is what's obviously going away, it's degrading. I mean, I have our float attached to those pilings all the way along there. So,
I think I hear two different things. I think I hear you saying save the pier, and I think you're saying you need the floats there for fit-up.
right, well, we have an existing dock right now, there's a small building on it, et cetera, that we use as a staging area to work on vessels right now. And so that float is attached to those piles, and then the piles that go toward Ocean Air that butts up to their property.
And you've got floats all the way along that?
Pardon me?
You have floats the full length of that then?
Yeah, I mean, we put them in, went through, you know, Army Corps engineer, et cetera, way back when.
So if we,
At a cost of about $100,000.
so if we took that pier out, your floats you would lose that part of the float?
Correct.
Okay.
Because that float is tied to all those piles along that Squalicum Way, is the best way to describe it.
So I would like to visit the idea and look into keeping that pier. How that affects our fit-up float we have to build over here, I'm not sure if we can.
Well, we'll have to find some other coverage, yeah, to trade for it.
We've got a lot of coverage with that GP pier.
We're not removing that yet, but I guess we could accelerate that. Yeah, let staff come back to you with some options, and we'll discuss it with real estate.
I'd like to discuss it before we decide we're going to tear it down.
We wouldn't tear it down without coming to you for approval.
The other thing was I visited a little bit last time, was the bulkhead under Boundary Fish's dock. I don't know that we ever came to a decision. We were going to kind of look into that, what the cost of it was. Did we? I've had two different businesses approach me for using one of the other piers in Blaine there that Boundary has a month-to-month lease on. And I think we're compelled to leave them with that lease until they get their dock fixed, and they can't fix their dock until we get our bulkhead done, which means we can't bring more business to Blaine until we get that fixed. So I'm curious if we could ask for some staff time to look into the cost of that particular piece or not.
Yep. Good evening, Commissioners. Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. No conclusion was reached on what to do with that. We did conclude there's maybe 100, 110 feet of bulkhead that needs to be worked on. If asked for a number off the top of my head, I would say it's between $500 and $1,000 per foot. So I'd say our project is in about $500,000 to $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Adam. Okay. Last meeting, the executive director was gonna meet with the folks at the airport and report back to us on your
met
meeting, and Commissioner McCauley had sent me an email and asked to put it on this agenda. The agenda had already gone out, and I hadn't heard the results of that meeting. So if we could get a report on that, I'd appreciate it.
So I had a meeting with some IFF leadership. It wasn't folks from our airport. It was two gentlemen from the IFF. I believe they're both here, Robert and David. Yeah, it was a good meeting. I think we agreed on a lot of stuff. I had a couple things I wanted to look into and to rest some concerns. My staff has done that. We do have, after Commissioner McCauley made that request, we did prepare a report to you if you'd like to hear the staff report on this. We're prepared to do that.
Please, I'm in agreement. You in agreement, Bob?
Yep.
Mike? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon,
Commissioners, thanks for tabling this while I was out of town so that I could kind of regroup with everyone. Appreciate that. Elizabeth Monahan, Director of Human Resources. I've actually written out, I don't usually write out my presentations. I prefer to ad lib a little bit, but this gets pretty technical, okay, as far as RCW and everything. So I'm going to be very specific and read through this. And what I'd like to do is provide some context and history regarding, Commissioner McCauley, your request at the last meeting to change the job title of the Airport Operations Specialist to firefighter, and thereby including those employees into LEF, which is the Law Enforcement Officer and Firefighter Pension Plan. And I recognize that this topic of LEP membership is very sensitive and emotional for our airport employees, and we've got a few here. I've said hello to you. And I just want to make sure that for you, the commission, and for the employees that are here, and potentially those other employees who are working and may watch this video later, that as I go through this presentation, I'm not assigning value or lack thereof to my comments. I'm simply taking RCW, WAC, and a Court of Appeals decision and applying it to the facts as I know them. Okay, so I just want to make sure that everyone understands where I'm coming from. So first we need to understand where the definition of firefighter comes from and how it's interpreted. So RCW, this is where it starts getting a little technical, 4156.030, paragraph 7, defines uniform personnel as, under letter E, firefighters, as that term is defined in RCW 4126.030, or letter F, employees of a port district in a county with a population of 1 million or more whose duties include crash, fire rescue, and other firefighting duties. So since the population of Whatcom County is significantly less than 1 million, we have to look at RCW 4126.030. So under that regulation, firefighter means, letter A, any person who is serving on a full-time, fully compensated basis as a member of a fire department of an employer who is serving in a position which requires passing a civil service examination for a firefighter and who is actively employed as such, or letter B, anyone who is actively employed as a full-time firefighter where the fire department does not have a civil service examination. So that goes on to have other letters in there, but they clearly don't apply to us, like the secretary of the fire department is not included in other things. So if you want the full text, I'm happy to provide that RCW for you. So we don't have civil service exams here. We also don't have a fire department, okay? So we keep digging into the regulations. We go level to level, and we get to WAC, Washington Administrative Code. And we get to WAC number 41-104-225. There's a section that's titled, Am I a LEF member? Sounded like I should read that. So it provides further definition of a firefighter. It says, A, you're a firefighter if you are employed in a uniform firefighter position by an employer on a full-time, fully compensated basis, and as a consequence of your employment, you have the legal authority and responsibility to perform or to direct or perform fire protection activities that are required for and directly concerned with preventing, controlling, and extinguishing fires. Small letter A, or small letter 1, fire protection activities may include incidental functions such as housekeeping, equipment maintenance, grounds maintenance, fire safety inspections, lecturing, performing community fire drills, and inspecting homes and schools for fire hazards. These activities qualify as fire protection activities only if the primary duty of your position is preventing, controlling, and extinguishing fires. So, by definition, if employees meet the definition of a firefighter under 41-26-030, that is the definition under LEF membership. They are thereby included as a uniform personnel under RCW 4156. So before I go into the history, I'd like the Commission to understand what both of those regulations mean, okay? And what is included once you gain membership into those.
So first, the state legislature created LEF in about 1970 so that employees that were engaged in those type of duties who could no longer physically perform the duties had an opportunity to retire early with full benefits and seek alternative employment if so desired. LEF 1, as we now call it, provided for full retirement age 50 with 5 years of service. The plan became too expensive and membership was cut off in 1977. So members who became eligible on October 1, 1977, they are in what we call LEF 2 plan. LEF 2 provides full retirement pension at age 53 with 5 years of service. It's a much more robust plan than the retirement plan as compared to PERS, which is the Public Employee Retirement System, which is what all of the other employees at the port are covered under. LEF 2 also provides provisions such as a disability and death benefit that are significantly greater than those provided under PERS. So it's totally understandable why employees would like this plan. It's a great deal to think that you could get full retirement at age 53. It's a really good and very robust plan. There are differences in the costs, and I think Commissioner McCauley, you said that the cost would stay the same for employers if these specific employees went into LEF. Actually, the costs do decrease a little bit. So today, in PERS, the current rate that employees pay into Plan 2 is 7.38% of our earnings. Okay, that's what everyone in PERS Plan 2 pays. The port pays 12.7%. In LEF 2, then the cost to employees goes up, so that goes up to 8.75%, but the cost to the port goes down to 8.93%. So there is a cost savings for employers when their employees qualify into LEF. So then let's shift gears, because I talked about two different RCWs. So let's talk about RCW 4156. It is about uniform personnel. 4156.430 reads, the intent and the purpose of this gets really technical, I'll have to read it. Chapter 131, Laws of 1973, is to recognize that there exists public policy in the state of Washington against strikes by uniformed personnel as a means of settling their labor disputes, that the uninterrupted and dedicated service of these classes of employees is vital to the welfare and the public safety of the state of Washington, that to promote such dedicated and uninterrupted public service, there should exist an effective and adequate alternative means of settling disputes. That was a quote from the RCW 4156.430. So what is that alternative method? The alternative that is provided in RCW is a specific process of addressing unresolved contract negotiations, first through mandated mediation, then through final and binding arbitration, with an arbitration panel decision on the unresolved issues, including wages, benefits, and other terms and conditions of employment. The practical implication of what we in the field call interest arbitration is that the decision and the authority to set wages, hours, and other terms and conditions of employment with represented staff is removed from you as the commission and as the authoritative body, and is given to a panel of arbitrators for a binding decision. So as you know, when we go into contract negotiations, I bargain with the union based on parameters that you give me. In interest arbitration, once we get to impasse, we're assigned a mediator. That's not final and binding. If we're still at impasse, we go to interest arbitration. And at that point, whatever parameters you have given me are gone. You lose control. It's given to an arbitration panel, okay? It would create a very different negotiations environment, particularly given the other three unionized groups we have at the port. The arbitration panel can find fully with the employer, they can find fully with the union, or, as in many cases, they split the decision, okay? While in contract negotiations, as in any contract negotiations, employment conditions stay status quo. As you can imagine, if you add in these different layers, the process becomes significantly more lengthy, at which time we can't adjust any terms and conditions of employment. So this could have a real effect on our healthcare plan, because our plan and the corresponding premium sharing is the same structure for all employees, represented, non-represented, and even you as elected officials. So if this process of interest arbitration takes a long time, we could have one group of employees where we have to carve out somehow and figure out healthcare with them while we're in the interest arbitration process. So let me stop there and ask you if you have any questions about what those two RCWs mean as far as inclusion, if you're included in those RCWs.
I have a separate question. When's the contract expire?
Contract right now with IFF is 18? December 31 of 18,
December
so
of
next
18.
year.
That's correct. Commissioners, this discussion may take a while, so I'm going to encourage us to take a 2-minute break, and we've got some out-of-town guests that are totally out of their time zone. They may not want to sit around for this conversation.
Perfect.
Can we take 2
We'll
minutes?
take a
and
2 minutes,
convene?
we'll adjourn for 2 minutes.
Thank you.
We'll have a beer later.
We'll reconvene the meeting.
Okay, so during the break, I had one of the gentlemen from Local 106 come up and ask for clarification on what I meant by full retirement. So let me kind of define that a little bit for you. So the Department of Retirement Services, when we talk their language and say full benefits, it doesn't mean that you necessarily get a wonderful package. It's based on your actual years of service. So under LEF 2, age 53, there's no early retirement reduction factor. Okay, so you still have the same formula. It's based on your years. So if you have 20 years, you take 20 times 2%. That's in your final average salary. That's your benefit. If you're only there for 5 years, and the 5 years is the vesting, then it's 5 times 2% times your final average salary.
So that's similar to PERS.
But PERS full retirement is at 65. Okay, so every year you retire early under PERS, there's an early retirement reduction factor. So then you take 2% times your years of service times an early retirement reduction factor and your final average salary, and that's what your benefit is. So the difference is age 53 versus age 65. The formulas are the same, but there's no early retirement reduction factor at 53. Where if you were under PERS, you wouldn't be eligible for retirement at 53. Early retirement with the reduction factors is 55. Does that make sense? I'm going to ask the gentleman that mentioned that to me. Did that clarify it for you? Yes, it did. Okay, there you are. Okay,
Did you
good.
say 55 or 65?
65 is full under PERS.
Okay.
Early retirement, you can go as early as 55, but you will suffer the early retirement reduction factors.
Okay. And can I ask?
Sure, go ahead,
Can I
Commissioner.
ask one question for clarification? Under the WAC 41, I believe this, I got the right number written.
Yeah, well-
41-104-225, section whatever it says, you're classified as a firefighter if you're preventing or containing a fire, correct?
If your primary duty of your position is preventing, controlling, and extinguishing fires.
Thank you.
Any other questions about those two RCWs before we go on to the history with the port?
Just to be very, very clear, so everything that you've told us, which is a lot to digest right at this minute, in a nutshell, though, it's exactly what every city or municipality or county or whatever is already doing in Washington State. So we're literally just looking at doing exactly what's already standardized across the state, just not at our port, right? Same retirement system, same conversations, all the same stuff.
But
that,
it's-
so for
it's
example, the
applying
city of
the-
Bellingham has the exact, what you're talking about is what the city of Bellingham is already doing with their
Right.
firefighters.
Because
Okay.
their firefighters clearly meet the definition under LEF. So
Okay.
they clearly fall under those two RCWs.
Sure, okay.
Yeah. Any other questions before I go on?
Sure.
No, I'll have one later.
Okay. So your request is pretty interesting because the port and our airport operations specialists have a lot of history on this topic. So we're going to roll back time and go back to 1995, okay? So in 1995, IF, at that point in time, our airport operations, they were called technicians, not specialists. I'm not sure when that title change happened. They were represented part of Local 3266. Did I get that right? 3266. And at that time, the local petitioned the Department of Retirement Systems to be classified as a firefighter under RCW 4126 for the purpose of gaining membership into LEF. So the Department of Retirement Systems gave this to an administrative law judge to conduct fact-finding investigations, and several of our employees who are still with us were there in 1995 and participated in the fact-finding. So on October 31st, 1996, then Department of Retirement Systems Director Cheryl Wilson denied LEF membership to the airport operations technicians. Director Wilson, using the administrative law judge's fact-finding information, determined that the airport employees do not meet the definition of full-time firefighter because firefighting duties and related activities comprise 40% of their job and therefore are not considered the primary duty. The remaining 60% of the duties are not incidental to firefighting. So what that means is when I listed the firefighting, housekeeping, equipment maintenance, if your primary duty is firefighting, then all those things that are incidental to firefighting get wrapped up into the duty. So they're considered all part of firefighting. And what she said in her decision was that those 60% of the other duties that the airport technicians at that time, those duties were not incidental to firefighting. They were separate and distinct. So finally, Director Wilson mentioned that firefighters are either commissioned, pass a civil service exam, and work in a fire department. And she determined that our airport employees did not meet any of those provisions. Okay? So as you may suspect, the IAFF exercised their right and appealed the decision to the Superior Court, which affirmed the director's decision. The decision was then appealed to the Washington State Court of Appeals in December of 1998. So in the meantime, either before the case was heard at the Court of Appeals or right in that same time frame, I'd like you to note that there was a bill introduced at the State Senate modifying RCW 41-26030 to specifically include, quote, trained airport firefighters, unquote, into the definition of firefighter. So that was a bill brought through the State Senate. I don't have any information other than that, except that the bill did not make it. I don't know why, I don't know where it ended, but I just wanted to make that note because I found the timing very coincidental. Okay? So October 22nd, 1999, the Court of Appeals ruled that the airport employees were not full-time firefighters within the meaning of RCW 41-26030, paragraph 4, and therefore not eligible for LEF membership. Interestingly, the Court of Appeals did not review the administrative law judge's fact-finding information regarding job duties, as the technicians in the union did not assign error to or otherwise contest the administrative law judge's fact findings. This means that the job duties and the time involved in performing the duties was not in dispute. The administrative law judge found that firefighting duties, including fire training, inspection, preparation, and actual response time, was approximately 40% of their time. So the Court of Appeals decision was not appealed to the State Supreme Court, and it is the final decision in the current rule. So during the 2009-2010 contract negotiations between the Port and Local 106, so I think the merger happened in 2008, is that right? Somewhere around there. So we're now negotiating with 106. One of the proposals and conversations at the table was that 106 and our airport employees wanted inclusion into LEF. So at that time, I was brand new to the Port. I had not dealt with LEF, didn't know what it was. So what do? I call Department of Retirement Services and say, what is it? How do I understand it? Tell me the details. So they informed me of the Court of Appeals decision, and so I asked, then how does such a decision get overturned? And I was told by Department of Retirement Systems that we did not have the ability to negotiate membership into LEF, and the decision could be overturned by the Department of Retirement Systems director if there was a material change in job duties. Okay? So we're going to go back to job duties the same way the administrative law judge did back in 1995. So at that point in time, I worked with airport management, who was in place at that time. We conducted a time and duty study to see if the job had materially changed since 1995. I used data that was collected by employees, and my calculation indicated that less than 40% of airport employees' time was dedicated to firefighting and fire-related duties. So I included any kind of training on the apparatus, inspection of the apparatus, cleaning, housekeeping, anything that I could tie to firefighting duties and the actual response time and the fire watch time as generously as possible, and I couldn't get to 40%, okay? All of the data that I collected, I copied and I gave to then IAFF president. And until recently, that was kind of the end of the conversation, okay? So given the decision from the Court of Appeals, LEF membership is not as easy as changing a title or a job description. The job needs to materially change such that firefighting duties are in fact the primary duty. And it's my opinion that the job has not changed such that firefighting duties are the primary duty. That means being performed more than 50% of the time. In my opinion, it's airport operations that are the primary duty. Now, that's not giving value to one thing more important than the other. They're both extremely important, but when you look at time spent performing duties, that's where the data led me in 2010. And it corresponded with the data from 1995, the administrative law judge hearing. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Sunil to talk more about the duties.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening, Commissioners. Sunil Harman, Director of Aviation. So we looked at in totality what duties, essential and otherwise, are entailed in the allocation of time for an operations specialist. And universally in the airport business, they are now known as specialists rather than technicians. And we actually took all of the aircraft rescue firefighting related activities, including the coverage times, 15 minutes before and after commercial operations, the totality of the training, the live fire training, testing of foam and apparatus, inspection and maintenance, and we were very liberal in coming in at, it comprised about 25% of their time. The remainder of the time, and I'm not weighing this either, I'm not saying one is more essential than the other. Obviously, responding to an emergency is an extremely crucial and essential function. The question is that the primary function? And I would submit to you that it's not, because the other operating activities are actually security and safety based, which is to prevent the type of incidences that you would respond to in the aircraft rescue and firefighting role. Those are codified under Federal Aviation Regulations Part 139 and TSA Regulations 1542. And they involve inspections of the airfield, maintenance of the airfield, ensuring that all lighting, marking, navigational facilities are functioning, wildlife management, terminal and perimeter inspections, portal inspections, security challenges, responding to security alarms, NOTAMs, issuing notice to airmen on conditions, escorting workers, construction assistance, tenant and public relations, snow removal, and caretaking. So if I were to then separate the non-aircraft rescue and firefighting functions and apportion the time that's spent on any given day, averaging the time, 30% of the time is spent on Federal Aviation Administration certification requirements and Transportation Security Administration security requirements. About 30% of the time is spent on public and tenant relations and assistance. This is essentially what it is at other airports too. Ensuring that your general aviation and commercial tenants have what they need to conduct their operations as Port being the landlord of the facility. Then there's basic troubleshooting, light maintenance work, which is not covered by the maintenance department, assigned tasks that they are assigned at the discretion of the airport operations supervisor, training, airport caretaking, which is essentially custodial type activities, snow removal activities to ensure that we have a functioning airfield. We looked at what the state requires in the state of Washington for a firefighter and what our airport operations specialists, and the three categories that they meet the requirements: age, driver's license, citizenship, high school diploma. Where we are deficient is in the EMT certification. They need to meet and exceed through written exam, oral exam, medical testing, and physical testing. Those, of course, we don't conduct to ensure that they meet state firefighting requirements.
Sunil, I'm going to jump in on some of these because instead of waiting to the end, I think we can save some time. Can you step back one slide? I feel like I'm old when I say slide. It says go to slide. We have slides. So does the FAA require can you describe for me of these duties on the pie chart, which of them are required by the FAA and which are not?
For the airport to be certified as a commercial airport, there have to be inspections conducted of the airfield. That's an essential function. They also have to ensure that the approaches and departures to the airport are clear or of obstructions. They have to ensure that there isn't wildlife or other activity that might create a hazard to air navigation. They have to ensure that equipment essential to the operation of the airfield is functioning. If a facility is down, a navigational facility is down, they have to issue an appropriate notice to airmen. Those are sort of the functions related to aircraft rescue and firefighting is essential as part of Part 139. It's both described in the airport certification manual as well as in the airport safety plan.
Okay, so in the 10% that's described as training, what is that?
The 10% that's described as training is training beyond what would be required for conducting aircraft rescue and firefighting functions.
Okay.
These are training related to interacting with customers, ensuring that they know how to operate. We have equipment and doorways, alarm systems. They actually respond to baggage screening systems where there are jams and other issues, bag belts that are taking bags from the ticket counter to the baggage clearing, security, and screening facility, and so on.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Can you go to the next slide for a minute? So I have a global question. Our ops operations specialists out there are good employees, fine people. If they want to move up and become a full-fledged firefighter in the Bellingham Fire Department, do they have an advantage over anyone else applying for that job, assuming they can pass an exam, oral exam, and all that?
Well, we're unique, sir. Among airports in Washington and in the United States, it's very unusual to have both aircraft rescue firefighting and the customary functions of an operations specialist combined, as we do here at Bellingham. It allows us to have a much lower operating cost structure. We're attractive to the airlines because the airlines pay maybe 15, 16% of our overall operating costs, where typically at airports they pay 30%, even smaller airports. To answer your question, with respect to preparation, this is really, an airport operations specialist position is really a pathway for people to get into the airport business, not in the firefighting business. So of 4 of my operations supervisors, 3 have come up from the ranks, and they're graduate and postgraduate degrees in airport management. The interest when you recruit for these positions is people who are interested in operating and running an airport, not necessarily becoming a firefighter. That's a separate pathway. This doesn't enable somebody to become a firefighter.
Thank you.
Sunil, is there any, so the requirements on the left labeled column firefighter are what the city of Bellingham has for their minimum requirements?
Sir, these are Washington state requirements.
Okay. So the airport ops columns, although the port doesn't require those other 6 items, there's nothing preventing the port from requiring those other 6 items.
It doesn't, except the next slide is where I talk about, that's a specialty that would require both training and expense. So we're looking at a firefighter that meets all those requirements, requiring essentially 600 plus hours of total training over a period of 13 weeks. And the costs associated with that, both in terms of overtime that we would have to pay, as well as the training costs, were we to want to bring them up to certified firefighter level. Whereas an aircraft rescue firefighting person gets a 40-hour week, 1 week of training, and then recurrent training on an annual basis to be deemed competent to respond to an aircraft rescue incident.
But doesn't this 600 hours, isn't that the training for someone to do like structural firefighting and that sort of thing, certainly things that we would never have as a job requirement here at the Port of Bellingham. So that requirement for 600 hours wouldn't exist.
It combines structural, confined spaces.
Right. But we would never have that here unless our airport duties changed or we merged with another fire department.
That raises an interesting question. Should we go forward with this? You're essentially, the decision you're going to make today is going to ultimately determine whether you have a separate fire department at the airport. You'll have a ARF function, that's firefighters, and a separate operations specialist role, separate from ARF.
Why do they have to be separate?
Because essentially, you're going to be drawing people to perform firefighting functions and everything that entails. And if I may, going to the next slide, I can show you where the other airports are relative to us. So if you look at all of the other commercial airports, that's SeaTac, Painfield, which is going to be a commercial airport, Spokane, Walla Walla, they perform ARF structural and medical services. Our folks perform ARF services.
Why do the other ones perform all those services?
Because they have a separate fire, they operate a separate.
They have a separate.
Yeah, they either have interlocal agreements, as in the case of Walla Walla, Pangbourne. In the case of Boeing Field is unique, where they have airport police and firefighters performing both functions. But it's not a commercial airport. It's not a Part 139 airport.
So we can't have everybody do one thing?
I'm not saying that, sir. That's a decision you need to make. You're going to have to make as a policy.
What I'm asking, is it feasible to have them do structural and medical and all the other ops jobs they do?
Yes, there's just a cost associated with that. We have 10 good people right now. I don't know how many of them are EMT or structural certified, but if we want to bring them up to a firefighter level, then we're either going to have to train them and pay for the training and the time to do it. And the other question is, what do we do if they don't make it through the training? Do we retain them as firefighters, or do we hire them back as operations specialists?
So, Commissioner, you've heard from staff. Obviously, your decision here. The staff will implement whatever you decide, however you decide to go forward. I would urge you that if we want to change the titles of folks, that we do so within contract negotiations, because I think a lot of the stuff you've heard here, I brought up with Robert and David, and I think they can be contracted around. I think everyone's interest here is in the success of our airport and in growing our airport. What I don't want to do is put our airport at a disadvantage and have costs increase and lose routes. So that's my encouragement, but at the end of the day, it's your decision.
Well, I'm not sure I would want to make the decision today. This brings a whole new light to, and thank you, both of you, and welcome back from vacation. My gosh, you jumped right into the heat of it. First of all, I think we should have public comment on it, so I don't mind putting it on the agenda for our next meeting to vote on, because I think if we do it now, it looks like we're behind closed doors. We're making a decision without the public's input or the opportunity to have it on the agenda. That's not.
Dan, I got to interrupt. Why do you need public input? This is normally a conversation we would have in executive session anyway.
Well, number one, it's going to cost a lot of money.
But let me jump in here for a
I'm not
second.
sure about that. I haven't heard any numbers yet.
Yeah, let me
That's
jump
one
in,
thing
because I'm a little.
I keep hearing it's going to cost more, but I haven't heard those numbers, and maybe
I think that depends on how it's implemented. If you see the examples of the other airports that Sunil showed you, and you're establishing a separate fire department from an ops department, then you're going to have an increase in costs. And how many bodies that is, I mean, we can do the math for you and give you an estimate. But if we are able to keep these essential operating duties of the staff in place, then you don't necessarily have the cost increase.
So I have to express a little frustration, and please, Sunil and Elizabeth, don't feel like I'm picking on you here, but 2 weeks ago, I asked for staff to look at how we can make this happen. And we've all sat here for the last over an hour about all the reasons how we can't make it happen. But the request was, how do we make it happen? And that's really the answer that I want to see. So the thing about numbers how do we get around this labeling, because we seem to be stuck on the words firefighter versus ops specialist. The answers to those questions are the ones that we actually need. And I'd like to make a motion, by the way, so we can have a proper conversation. My motion is this: motion to change the Airport Operations Specialist position title to Airport Rescue Firefighter 1 and 2, Airport Operations Specialist 3 to Supervise Airport Rescue Firefighter 1 and 2, and respond as a member of the ARFF response team, and shift those personnel assigned and trained to ARF duties from the PERS retirement system to the LEF retirement system. And if we can have a proper conversation, that would be awesome. So Dan, you were saying something, I interrupted you, and I apologize.
I want to know before I vote on this, I want to know what the cost is.
We can't tell you that. We just don't know, because we don't know the effect of a lot of the stuff that's going on. We're not trying to say no. We're telling you we're doing what staff is supposed to do and telling you what the pitfalls are of going down this road out of what I think is out of sequence. What I would consider in sequence is a proper negotiation between the IFF and the port management that solves some of these outstanding questions. A big problem that I see, and I expressed this to Robert, is this insurance. We're going to have 10 people that could essentially be on a different medical insurance program than the other 90 because of this arbitration issue. That could be incredibly expensive when you're buying insurance for 10 people. But that can be solved. I'm not saying no to that. I'm just saying we got to sit down and we got to come out with a contractual solution to this.
And I want the staff to do that. I truly do. I want the staff to do that.
So Commissioners, I just need to reiterate that we have a Court of Appeals decision, okay? We don't have the ability to change that Court of Appeals decision unless we go through a process with the Department of Retirement Systems that demonstrates that there is a significant and material change in duties such that firefighting under the RCW is the primary duty.
Let me throw this out there, okay?
If you can do that, then the answer is solved.
Yeah,
There
let me throw
doesn't
this
have to
out
be
there. One sec.
negotiations.
Hang on, Elizabeth. Okay, so when I was 18 years old, I joined the Marine Corps, okay? So my primary duty was a rifleman. I carried an M203s, an M16 with a grenade launcher. I walked around with grenades on me, all right? That was my primary duty. The number of times I fired my weapon against an enemy was 0, even though I fought a war, right? So under the logic of what we're hearing you say is that my primary duty was not what I never did, but what I was actually always doing, which was cleaning Humvees, cleaning radios, setting up antennas, all the things that a radio operator does. But that's the same exact logic. So I was never a rifleman. I was only a radio operator. But the Marine Corps would have an alternative viewpoint of that, which is my first job was as a rifleman, part of a fire team of 4 and part of a squad of 16, not radio operator. That's the same exact logic that's going through my head when I think, what's the primary duty? If we can't operate an airport without fire people to extinguish fires, then their primary duty must therefore be firefighting, not everything else that they do. Because we can operate an airport without maintenance or cleaning or those other things. And Sunil, you pointed out some things that we have to do for safety and all that stuff. I get that. But we certainly cannot operate an airport without someone to extinguish a fire in case of a crash. Therefore, their primary duty is firefighter.
Then I think that is the argument that would need to go to the Department of Retirement Systems.
Okay, so
Commissioner, to clear my mind, didn't you get more money for, just like I did in the Army, for combat pay compared to non-combat pay?
They call it hazardous duty pay.
But it was a difference.
Yeah, but you also got paid if you got extra if you got married. Or if you went overseas to a non-combat duty station, but you were still overseas.
Okay.
So. In 2011, the Federal Register published Volume 76, Number 65. It's April 5th, 2011, and Congress removed the percent of non-exempt work tolerance.
Is that the Fair Labor Standards Act that you're referring to?
I don't know what the title of it is. I don't think it is. I think it's in the Federal Register.
When I watched the video of 2 weeks ago.
No, that's a separate document.
Okay, that's a different regulation than what you cited then?
Yes.
Okay, because when I looked at that, I tried to understand where that was coming from, and it appeared to me that that was from the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the act that determines whether or not people are eligible for overtime. And I believe under that act, they were talking exempt and non-exempt is based on overtime and saying it doesn't matter. I mean, firefighting is not exempt, so they are eligible for overtime. And it's, I think that the wording in that was that the percentage of exempt work that they do is not relevant to determining their in non-exempt status.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit different standard that we're looking at, because that's talking about who is eligible for overtime.
Well, if Congress said that it doesn't matter how much work you do based on a percentage, then, for example, the firefighters that I've talked to here locally all say that when's the last time they put out a fire, right? I mean, they don't happen very often, so they're always doing something else. So Congress removed the percentage language because it wasn't relevant anymore. They've done a very good job of making sure there are no fires. Therefore, they spend
So what they
the
do,
majority of their time
what
not
they
putting out
do
fires.
when they aren't on a call, all those activities, because the primary duty is firefighting, all those other activities are incidental to firefighting. So whether it's training, equipment maintenance, performing lectures, doing inspections, whatever else those are incidental to firefighting. Therefore, they're included into the total group. So what Department of Retirement Systems Director found and was affirmed through the courts was that all those other duties that Sunil talked about, those aren't incidental to firefighting. They are separate and distinct. Therefore, you can't lump them all together.
Lovely, but none of that made any sense to me.
You know, simple common sense tells me you have to have a firefighter there to fight a fire. And what I spoke back to, that those folks that are containing the fire, controlling the fire, putting out a fire, are classified as firefighters under that RCW. I have a problem with the judge's decision on the percentages. They're there to fight the fire first and foremost. The rest of that stuff is all second to whatever's going on as far as a fire, as I'm concerned, in my mind. I guess one of the questions, can they or can they not be in LEF if they're firefighters, if we classify them as firefighters at the airport?
If you change the job title and say these people that were formerly known as airport operations specialists, effective today are now called firefighters, Department of Retirement System is not going to allow them eligibility at this time. They're going to go through a process because we have a Court of Appeals decision. And they're going to say, show me the job duties.
I would like to hear from our legal, our legal counsel. We're overriding a judge's rule here.
So, a few things. Usually you have a motion on the floor that hasn't been seconded, so you know.
Second the motion.
Yeah, but we normally don't do that. There's only three of us. But thanks, John, I appreciate that. I know, it's weird.
It's a consensus rather
All right.
than Robert's rule.
Okay. Check the boxes. You have a court decision that's already defined, found out a year, how the process would occur to define the duties and whether someone's in left or PERS. I think Elizabeth done an excellent job of kind of trying to play it right down the middle and tell you what the rules are. If you changed your duties, as what I heard, the motion read very quickly, but the tail end was to change the duties to meet left standards. You'd have to go through a process, figure out what that is, and that would then have to go through, back to, as I understand it, go back to the Department of Retirement for them to determine whether that met the requirements. You would not unilaterally implement that. You could decide to do that and pursue that. That's your decision, but given their court ruling, as I understand it, LEF would still, not LEF, but the Department of Retirement Systems would still make the determination of whether they fell under the firefighter, and the whole question of incidental duties and not would come up under the Department of Retirement Systems analysis. Your policy decision is you can do whatever, pursue whichever you want. Change the titles, change the duties. It won't necessarily end there. And I think what Rob is trying to say is, as staff, they would rather handle that through contract negotiations. It's your choice. This is a decision that you get to pursue. But if you decide to pursue the motion, I don't believe it just ends. You have to come up with the duties. Then that would go back to the Department of Retirement Systems. And I think Robin, as Sunil pointed out, there may be larger questions for you to consider.
So to be clear, in my motion, that there were no changes offered to the duties. The jobs would remain exactly the same. The change that you might be referring to, John, was the Airport Operations Specialist 3 as a supervisor of changing the language ops text to airport rescue firefighter. So duties would remain exactly the same.
There's a lot
Yeah,
there.
that's fine.
I tried to capture it all. I thought there was something at the end that says change duties to left as it was read.
No, the word duties is in this context, that the people who are assigned to ARF duties, who are currently in the PERS, would be moved to the left. That was the word
change of
duties.
duties.
No, the
that would
duties
have to
don't
happen, and That
change.
would go to the Department of Retirement.
Now, the duties don't change, it's just the personnel at the airport who are assigned ARF duties would move from PERS to LEF.
That, I think the issue under the case and what Elizabeth said is that doesn't necessarily implement that effect into left. That's still an analysis of the duties and the functions, and that would be, you could call that and try to drive that, but that the duties that they would have would still be analyzed by Department of Retirement to determine their classification. Just directing that by a motion doesn't accomplish that as I'm understanding what you're saying. So you'd have to go back to the functions and duties of what they're doing. You can set up a fire department. Essentially set up a firefighter is what one would be defined and pursue that. You can do that. You can change the titles and see if Department of Retirement Systems would accept that. You can try to change the duties and job descriptions, see if they'll accept that. They may look at what the actual duties are on the ground. That's the tension that I think Elizabeth is trying to convey to you.
But I understand we did that once. We did see if it changed, and they said it did not.
So, yeah,
That data that I collected in 2010 did not go to the Department of Retirement Systems. It went directly to 106.
I would like just enough time to digest this. I'm not saying I'm going to vote against it. I would just like to have, this is a lot to digest right now, and I'd like to do a little bit more research. I'd like public comment. I'd like comment from the folks who are out here during public comment. You say we would do this normally in a closed session, but we would still come down here and it would be on the agenda for public comment. That's all I ask.
Well, I'd asked 2 weeks ago to have it on this agenda, and it wasn't.
Yes,
So-
but we hadn't heard any of this, and now.
Right, and what I asked for 2 weeks ago was an answer to not how we couldn't do it, which I heard again tonight, but what were the steps needed in order to get it done? And we still don't have that answer tonight. How do we get it done?
The steps that you need to do to get these employees into LEF is to change job duties so that firefighting and all those duties incidental to firefighting become the primary duty, and then demonstrate that to Department of Retirement Systems. And at that time, what I understand from Department of Retirement Systems is that then they will identify at what point in time did those duties change so that they can determine what the eligibility date. It doesn't just go automatically back to the first day they started working here. They determine when did those duties change, and that is the date in which they become a LEF member. So then these folks become dual members under the retirement system. They have years of service under PERS, years of service under LEF. Total combined, it's a better package than PERS, but maybe not 100% as good as LEF. So that is the process. You change the duties, you convince DRS.
That's what I was trying to convey.
Regardless of what the Federal Register reports in 2011, which postdates the other decision by DRS that the port is standing behind right now.
Then if you don't want to change the duties, then I suppose an option is to take the duties as they stand and take it to DRS and see if they want to change their mind.
But you're still on this duties as a percentage of the overall work. That's what you're saying right now.
That's how the decision was written.
But that predates the decision that was published in the Federal Register in 2011, where they took out the percentage, erased it completely. So there's no attachment to who a firefighter is based on percentage of actual firefighting.
So what I hear you saying, Commissioner, is that the Federal Register, and I haven't read it, but the Federal Register provision would now control the determination of whether they are called a firefighter for purposes of LEF.
Sure, I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I'm
Basically,
reading.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know
I can't
if those are
confirm that
connected.
that's what the position under state law that the Department of Retirement Systems would take when analyzing whether or not a firefighter, as redefined with new duties, based on a Federal Register determination, whether they would classify them into LEP. I can't answer that
So,
right here.
Dan, I know you have the center seat, but with your indulgence, there's some folks here tonight that might be able to answer some of these points. And if there's a representative from the 106 that might be able to address, because I did hear some grumbling. I don't know who that would be.
Robert Glorioso, President, IFF Local 106. Appreciated the conversation that we had last week. I think we worked through some objections and concerns that you had. It was a great conversation. Thank you very much for that. In regards to the DRS and the duties that you're referring to, not sure if staff had the opportunity to reach out recently to the DRS, but we have. We've been working through and having those discussions with DRS for the past year. Most recently, a few months back, where we spoke with Mike Nelson. Absolutely, what you're referring to in the motion that you're bringing up, they are looking for that specific motion from this body, from this commission. That is all that they need for to make that determination. So simply, all they need is this motion to go, what you guys have made the motion for right now, to go through, get the phone call from Director Fix at your guys' request, at the commissioner's request, and that is all that would be needed for that process to take place. Simply, that's all they're waiting for.
So when you speak the process, Robert, to get the process Elizabeth is speaking to, whether they determine at that point that their process is to determine whether you can qualify for left or not?
Correction, they just need to hear from the employer that they are firefighters, and that is the process that they need in order to put them into the left system.
So they don't
It
have.
was simple. It was clear. It goes to their board, and their board makes that decision, and that decision has been consistent.
Is that what you were speaking to?
That's very inconsistent with the DRS people that I've been speaking with.
When
Who have given
was the
me-
last time you spoke to them? I would be the question I would have, because we've been in close contact with those folks.
Yesterday.
Okay. And this is the gentleman you spoke to?
Mike Nelson.
Mike Nelson?
Or correction, I'm sorry, Steve Nelson. Sorry, Steve Nelson. Yeah. And I have his contact information for you guys as well.
Okay.
You know, this is going to cost some money. It's not going to be where it's not going to cost anything, and our airport's losing money right now. I do think the only prudent thing to do is to let, if the public wants to weigh in on it, to just wait 2 weeks to give them the opportunity where maybe Rob and you can continue to work and pursue it, because this is all new to me.
Well, I would say I'd prefer to take a vote on this motion tonight, because if Mr. Sitkin, thank you very much, is correct, we can make all the motions we want, and if DRS says pound sand, then our motion is moot, right? So I would like to get this process started by saying yes to this tonight, have the staff go figure out how to make it happen, and if it's literally impossible without some legislative change, then we have an answer to our problem.
Commissioner Connor, can I just respond to something you said? I thought my presentation was pretty clear, that if you really want this to happen and you don't want to jump the legal hurdles, you create a fire department and you call them firefighters and you make those functions essentially firefighting functions. The inspection functions, all of the tech functions, the specialist functions are gone. So the totality of the function then would be ARFF. Now, based on the index of the airport, typically you're going to have at least 2 firefighters on duty at any time. Just based on scheduling and stuff, you're looking at a staffing level of between 5 and 6 firefighters at a cost of roughly about $1 to $1.2 million a year. That's what I can give you right now. But you asked for a vehicle. I tried to, there's no way you can parse these responsibilities and try to get a director to buy off that these are essentially firefighting functions. You're going to have them trained. You're going to have to call them firefighters and have the capability of performing firefighting functions, like every other airport does.
Sure. So not disputing that at all, Sunil, but it is possible for all of the existing duties to be part of their normal workday. There's no reason to have 6 dedicated people just watching a television screen waiting for a fire that hopefully never happens.
I understand, sir, but respectfully, somebody else asked the question, do they need to have structural, do they need to perform EMT functions? If you're calling them firefighters, there's an accident on the airport, a fire unrelated to an aircraft, the expectation is that they should be able to respond to it.
So I would say to the commission that 8 years ago, when I first brought this up, I would be very happy if we had EMT trained people at the airport.
So would I.
Because I think that that could be a function that we could serve the community with. So, and well, knowing that it does and could potentially cost much, well, I shouldn't say much, but more money.
So if I'm hearing correctly, Sunil, what you're saying is if we had a fire, okay, we don't have an ARF department anymore, we got a fire department, okay?
You're talking about separation of duties, sir. As I described them, you would take that ARF function, separate that function, as most airports have. That's a costly proposition, but it's done. And it gives you the pathway then to get the legitimacy that's required here in terms of primary functions and the ability to get into the union, the pension plan.
So my question was, let's just, for sake, say we made a fire department, okay? Then we no longer need ARF because we have the firemen there. Am I hearing that those firemen can't do the same duties they did when it was under the ARF department? Is that?
No.
Or they can?
They can.
Okay.
But you wouldn't want them to if you're trying to prove to a pension board that they should be accepted as firefighters. Because it dilutes, what I showed you the percentages, it dilutes the primary and other essential functions.
So how does it work then under the fire station when they're doing the janitorial service in the fire station, the cleaning up around the outside? How does that separate?
That's all ancillary to the airport firefighting. So typically at airports, all they do is ARF function. They don't perform these other responsibilities. It's a separate operations department that performs these other duties. But they also respond to structural fires, the garage fires, accidents on the roadway, medical emergencies. They perform those functions.
I can't help but think if we have a potential of adding $1 million overhead to our airport, that we don't at least give the general public a chance to weigh in on this.
I think
'Cause
we
all
should-
I'm asking is just 2 weeks.
I think we should be careful with that number because Rob told us earlier, we have not looked at costs.
And that's why I don't think we should be so hasty here. Just 2 weeks so we can weigh the situation out.
What else do you need to be weighed?
I want the public to be able to comment.
This is I think it's quite clear because we've been talking quite a while. This is potentially an extremely complex issue. I don't know that the average public weighing in would be more than just an opinion on what you and I and Bobby should be deciding up here. We have more information than anybody out there. The staff have been very, very helpful. They have more information than anybody out there. I don't think someone standing here giving me an opinion about how the staff here should be treated and what union they're in should be subject to just the whimsy of the public at large. That's not our job. So I don't necessarily need public input based on opinion about something that most people are going to have no information and understanding of, and I prefer that we pass this motion tonight. It directs staff to figure out how to make this happen. The process will tell us if it's possible or not. But waiting for more public input on this doesn't answer any questions for me.
My concern is I hear that we always make behind-the-door decisions, and I just don't want to be.
This one's on TV.
Well, true, but the public, we haven't had the public weigh in at all. It's not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, we vote on it. It's that simple. We didn't get the results of any of this until just today. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm just saying, let's put it on the agenda and vote on it at our next meeting. I don't know what that's going to hurt, other than the fact that we cover our bases with the general public. I think it's important to not be perceived as we're making decisions without public input.
Well, with respect to the agenda, I meet with Rob every Wednesday morning, and I asked that this be placed on this week's agenda. And you said earlier that you didn't find out about it until too late. It doesn't mean we can't change the agenda before next Monday, because when I sat in the middle chair, we did that on occasion when things came in late, and the new documents were published. So this could have been on tonight's agenda if the president of the commission had wanted it on tonight's agenda.
We
I
didn't-
hadn't heard any of
In my
this.
defense, we didn't meet on Wednesday. One of us
Not
didn't
last
show
Wednesday,
up.
the one prior, my apologies, the one prior, so 13 days ago. Yeah. And not criticizing you, I'm assuming you passed on the request that I made.
I did not, because I didn't have that request. The request came at the last commission meeting for staff to look into it, for me to sit down with the IFF, and I did
And I
that.
wanted to hear just what we heard tonight.
Hang on, to be clear, the documents I asked you about a little while ago, that was the meeting that we had, and I handed them to you and said, I'd like to have this on the next agenda, that was the conversation we had.
I got those
Okay,
documents
right.
the day after we had this conversation, this meeting, and my direction was to go meet with the IF, which I did.
Which I also asked, yeah. Just a little clarity there, but regardless, there was nothing preventing this conversation from being on tonight's agenda. And my motion is still on the floor.
Commissioner, do we have your motion in writing, or do you have it that Diane can have it? I guess we could look at the video. I'm just concerned we get it right. There's a long motion.
So Commissioner McCauley, can I also ask, you have the word supervisor in there for our, what is currently called Airport Operations Specialist 3. Am I understanding that correctly? Because we have supervisors. We can't have supervisors and employees under the same union. So I would suggest if you're going to go forward with that motion that you call them lead.
Yes, so the basic function, the document, which hopefully will be shared with you soon, the basic function of the Airport Operations Specialist 3 would be, quote, to act as lead over those ships. So I think that
Okay.
satisfies your,
Right.
yes.
But not the title of supervisor.
I don't think that there's a need for a
Okay, I thought I
change.
heard you say
However-
supervisor.
However, what I'm hoping will happen here is that we take this, we move forward, we answer these questions. The contract with the airport group right now is up for a conversation next year.
Correct.
So we answer these questions, we have the conversation with the airport group, the local weighs in to give us the right input, DRS answers the question, but without this motion going forward, nothing will happen. So all this does is get this process moving.
So it would change, if it were to change, it would change in December of 18?
I don't know when it would change. I'm not suggesting that we change it.
But you're
based
not
on a specific
suggesting
time.
changing it right today?
My motion stands as is. I don't know how to answer your question.
I have a question. In Seattle, Sunil, how does their airport what do their airport firefighters do?
They're big, though.
They perform firefighting functions only.
Only. They're huge, though. But you got Walla Walla and Yakima.
As in most airports, that's how it's structured. We're very, very unique, even in the state of Washington, as I tried to illustrate to you. And my objective really was, if you want to make this happen, and you've already got this administrative law judge ruling, you've already got this inventory of duties and responsibilities, the pathway is pretty clear then. It's more expensive, it requires more certification, and protecting the people that may not make it as firefighters. That's.
Thank you.
So if I can call for the vote, I would like to do that.
Okay. I hate to ask you, but can you read the motion?
I will read the motion again. It's a motion to change Airport Operations Specialist position title to Airport Rescue Firefighter 1 and 2, Airport Operations Specialist 3 to supervise Airport Rescue Firefighter 1 and 2, and respond as a member of the ARF response team, and shift those personnel assigned and trained to ARF duties from the PERS retirement system to the LEF retirement system.
Okay.
But before we vote, I'd like to say something if I could.
Rip it
This
out?
is getting more complex as we go forward. I have some unanswered questions that I need to have answered, and they can't be answered here this evening. And that's been made obvious to me, because I got one side saying this and one side saying that. So I'm uncomfortable with some things right now. So that's going to affect how I vote. I want everybody to know that before I vote.
I don't worry about it. It's going to go down anyway.
I would like to vote in favor of it if we could wait and have the public weigh in. I think that's important. I just like to go through that public process. And I don't understand why 2 weeks would make a difference, but If you both choose to go forward now, you don't withdraw your second, you want to vote on this right now.
Well, the motion's on the floor, so we either call a vote.
Yeah.
You can call the vote, or you can move to table.
We're not working
takes
our rules.
We can move to table it. I would move we table it and vote in 2 weeks.
We have to vote on my motion first before you can make a motion.
I don't think, is that the case, Council?
Motion to table does take precedence over the pending motion.
Wouldn't it be a postponement, not a tabling? But,
Tabling the motion to the next meeting.
yeah, we can postpone it to the next
I
meeting.
would be in favor of doing that. How about you, Bobby?
Well, we got to call for the vote on the first motion, don't we?
No,
We
first
could-
we vote,
Take precedence.
tabling takes precedence, so first we vote on tabling or not. I move that we just table it for 2 weeks.
I move that we table it till the next meeting. I've got questions that I need answered I'm not comfortable with. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying I want to talk to this person about that.
And I'm not saying no either.
And I want it on the next agenda. I don't want any mistakes.
It will be on the next agenda. As president of the commission, I'll tell you, it will be on the next agenda.
Because right now I'm pretty uncomfortable about this whole conversation we've had this evening.
I want to make sure we get the answers to the questions, so I'm willing to stay as long as it takes till we get, so I know what the questions are, because I can't get the answers to questions I don't understand, and it is a very, very complex issue, so I'm asking for everyone's patience on this. We're trying to get the right decision here, so. Do we have, should we meet individually for the questions? How do you guys want to do questions?
Well, the intent of my motion was to move this conversation forward and answer the questions about all of the reasons why we can't do what we want to do. So those haven't been answered at all as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's been tabled till the next meeting, and we'll have one-on-ones with you twice before that meeting.
As many as we need to do to get the questions and I get the answers, yeah.
Right. So you can get your questions.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I have a motion to table that motion 2 weeks.
You got it.
Yes, and it was a second.
got
So
it.
we need to vote on that. All in favor of tabling the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay. So the motion carries to
tabled.
table it for 2 weeks. It will be on the agenda. Gentlemen, it will be on the agenda in 2 weeks, for sure. Okay, any other new we don't call it new business anymore. We call it other business.
Only one final thing, you should have the IMTC report that just came out. Chris Clark should be getting a copy as well. So it's useful information, but the thing, because I'll be gone here in a couple of months, but I think that the thing that the commission in the future, and certainly the staff should pay attention to, is that there's data in the goods that are going up and down I-5 in this report, and we should push very, very hard on the people that hold the data and don't share enough of it with us. Because one thing that Chris can definitely do is figure out where a truck is coming from and what's inside of it and where it's going to. And we can go to those firms and potentially get their business. So we have to push on the folks that have this data. It's federal data. So we have to push on them to get the data, and that could definitely help our shipping terminals.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I'll pass that book on to him.
Okay, any other new business coming before us? Commissioner Briscoe? No. Commissioner McCauley?
All good.
We are adjourned.